Sanchez, and this podcast is for those of you who want to change your life and make a dent on the world. Okay, today we have somebody on who is going to tell us, how do we actually achieve the things we want out of life this year? How do we use research, data, and studies in order to create frameworks that make us able to live the life that we want by our actions every single day? We're going to steal habits from my friend Sahil Bloom, who is an author of the brand new book, 5 Types of Wealth. He is also a former private equity investor. He has millions of followers online, and he's known for one thing really interesting in my mind, which is taking frameworks from some of the best minds out there and applying them to everyday life. These frameworks led him to get mentors like Tim Cook, famously of Apple, running the joint. Also another friend of mine, Arthur Brooks, from Harvard, who famously wrote a book with Oprah. And so Sahil has this unique ability with his sort of private equity-like mind to go out into the world, pull together how high performers use data and frameworks in order to make our lives better. And when he talks about wealth, it's not just the same way we typically do on this podcast. We're not talking about just money, but we're talking about living an extensive life. So I think you guys will really enjoy this conversation. This is so applicable and so tactical for hitting your goals in 2025. Let's get into it. Okay, I want to start out with a concept that you got in front of millions of people and kind of changed how I think about life, actually. And I think for a ton of people on Twitter, it was the same thing, which is your idea of time billionaire. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. The first time I came across this was, I think it was on the Tim Ferriss Show podcast. An investor named Graham Duncan, who is a very successful investor, talked about this idea of the time billionaire. And as I went through the whole book research process, I spoke to Graham, and he basically said that during his career as an investor, he would interview hundreds of young people that were coming and joining his firm. And they all had the same goal, which was to one day become billionaires, dollar billionaires, to go make $1 billion. And what he said was that they were all billionaires in one very important way. They were time billionaires. They quite literally had billions of seconds left in their life. A billion seconds is roughly 30 years. So like when you're 20, you have maybe 2 billion seconds left. When you're 50, you have 1 billion seconds. And that idea is a really important one because what it implies is that time is your most precious asset. It is quite literally the only thing that you can't get back. And yet, as young people in particular, we never think about our time. We basically live in this world where time is nothing to us. We think we're immortal. And then at the very end, it's the only thing that you think about, but it's too late. It's gone at that point. And so the call to action around that idea of the time billionaire is to recognize that time is your most precious asset, to become aware of it. And the question that I go and ask people, especially young people, is, would you trade lives with Warren Buffett? He's worth $130 billion. He has access to anyone in the world. He reads and learns for a living. He flies around on private jets, does all these fancy things. But you wouldn't trade lives with him because he's 95 years old. There's no way you would agree to trade the amount of time you have left for all of the money in the world. So you know in the back of your mind that time has incalculable value. And yet, on a daily basis, how much time are you wasting? Sitting on your phone, scrolling around, worrying about other people, stressing over dumb things, comparing yourself to others, all of these stupid things that we do, when time is the only thing that matters in the end.
It's so good. You had this visual I remember from back in the day where you basically have, a father and a son, and you see the flip, right? So from the father taking care of the son to the son taking care of the father. And it was so poignant, which is what I like about a lot of your frameworks and the book, is you put these visuals to them too, where it's kind of like a kick in the gut. You're like, all right, Sahil, copy. I got it. Like, no more scrolling. Take it easy. But I really like that. You also said this quote that I loved, which was, every single thing you do today is something that your 90-year-old self will wish they could go back and do. The good old days are happening right now. I was wondering for you, since most people never think about time, you think about it a lot. When did that flip and why?
In 2021, I had a single conversation that changed my life. I was out for a drink with an old friend, and we were just catching up, and he was asking how I was doing. And I had spent the last 7 years of my life rising through the ranks in the finance world. I was working 80 to 100 hours a week. I was making more and more money, and thinking that that was how I was going to reach the land of success and happiness. And a lot of other areas of my life had started to suffer. Namely, I was living very far away from my parents, 3,000 miles away, and they were getting older. And so my friend asked how I was doing in this moment, and I said that it had started to get tough being so far away from my parents. They had started to show chinks in their armor, if you will. They were mortal. And he asked how old they were. And I said mid-60s. And he said, how often do you see them? And I said, maybe once a year. And he looked me in the face and just said, okay, so you're going to see your parents 15 more times before they die. And I remember feeling like I had been punched in the gut. I mean, the idea that the amount of time you have left with the people that you love most in this world is so finite, so countable, that you can put it onto a few hands, shook me to my core. And in that moment, I recognized that something had to change. That if we didn't make a change, I was going to wake up one day and wonder what the fuck I just did with my life. And that was the spark of this entire journey, of starting to recognize and appreciate time and starting to realize that you are actually much more in control of your time than you think. And the next day, we made a decision. My wife and I had a candid conversation, and within 45 days, I had left my job. We'd sold our house in California and moved across the country to live closer to my parents. And so we took that number, 15, and turned it into, now it's in the hundreds. I see my parents multiple times a month. You are much more in control of these things than you think, but only if you develop an awareness of just how important they are.
Yeah, you know what's interesting too is like we talk a lot, obviously, and I think a lot of times people write books and they talk about this stuff and they're like, but do you live it? You know? And one of the things you're really good about is when we go back and forth, you're like, you're kind of working a lot. Like, are you sure you want to do that? You're hanging out with Chris very much. And so I think it's also cool that you know, if somebody's listening to this, it's like, yes, you can internalize all this, but then also find yourself a couple buddies that'll keep you honest. And it seems like you've done that really well. And you've surrounded yourself with these interesting people that kind of have this same perspective too. One thought I had about that was, I saw this other video of yours that I had never seen before, and I don't know if we've talked about it, but you kind of have this theory on phones and how to not have them ruin your daily life. Do you know what I'm talking about and what video I'm talking about?
Not having them in front of you when you're with people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is is this database or is this a Sahil based?
No. There is scientific evidence that if I have my phone out on the table, even face down while we're having a conversation, you and I experience less feelings of connection after that interaction than if I don't have my phone out in front of us.
What about an iPad?
I'm sure it's the exact same effect. I mean, the phone, because of the feeling that we know we get from it, which is it draws our attention. As we're interacting, if I have this out in front of us, you are experiencing me as being less present in that conversation, which makes sense because as soon as it lights up, you see like my eyes jump to it. Because that's what it's built to do. These things are literally designed to grab at your attention. They have entire teams of people that are dedicated to making them addicting. And so the phone has become this drug in our lives that we know it's pulling your attention away from the things that really matter, the people that are sitting in front of you. And so when we talk about these things, we talk about cultivating these relationships, the people that you have around you that keep you honest on this stuff. So much of it is things like that. It's going back to the basics of how we operate as humans, where we can have a face-to-face interaction, and really importantly, where you have people in your circle who are willing to tell you the truth. I think about this all the time, that like friends are great, but a lot of friends will just pat you on the back and like cheer you on when things are going well, which, don't get me wrong, great. We need some cheerleaders in our lives. But more than cheerleaders, I need some people that are willing to hold me to account when I'm not living up to the things that I say I want to live up to. My wife is a huge truth teller in my life. I know that Chris is for you. Yeah. Willing to tell us the truth when we're not. But you need friends like that too. Yeah. Like I need friends who are willing to tell me when I am working on things that really don't make sense for me to work on, when I'm getting involved in like opportunities that don't really have the upside or aren't really down in my zone of genius. Yeah. You need those truth tellers in your life if you want to continue to grow. Yeah, it's true. Well, you and I kind of had that happen anyway, because you were like, listen, this thing that we were working on, which was this company, you're like, it's just not gonna be big enough for us. And like, we had to have a tough conversation, you know, but
I think because we had that tough conversation, like we're better friends.
Absolutely. And that's,
And
by
most
the way,
people will never do that.
Totally.
They'll just shove it down inside and then they'll have resentment. And then at some point, they kind of talk behind backs about other people because you never get it out.
I learned this from you, actually, and it's become a core mental model in my own life, which is when you avoid a hard conversation, you are taking on a debt that you have to repay with interest at a date in the future. Time does not heal anything when it comes to relationships. Yeah. So you have to make those minor repairs along the way. Otherwise, you're just going to have major repairs to make in the future. I've always thought that metaphor for thinking about hard conversations works. It might just be that you and I have finance minds, so we think in like the debt terms, but it makes sense to me. I'm like, it is literally a debt that you are going to have to repay one way or another, and it's just going to get worse. So having the hard conversation now is the smartest move for the future.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think a lot of times too, when people today have difficult conversations that they want to have, a lot of times they'll just avoid it they'll lose a friendship over it. Like I remember I had one instance with a girlfriend of mine, and she just didn't want to get on the phone and didn't want to ever talk about it. And our relationship to this day has never been repaired because of it. And so I think that's really normal when we have a society where young people are not actually engaging face to face anymore. We're texting back and forth. We're on social media, we're sending memes. That's the communication methods. We've sort of lost the ability to do the crucial conversations thing. Like back when you were in finance, didn't they make you read Crucial Conversations?
We didn't read it, but I know the principles.
Yeah. They made us read it at Vanguard because we were more touchy-feely.
Although it is like, I mean, even in the world of finance now, I think that the art of hard conversations has been lost. And I found it time and time again in my finance career that like, every single time you avoided a hard conversation with a management team that you had invested in, it ended poorly. It was bad because you were just delaying something that needed to happen along the way. And so I also think that like there are hacks that make hard conversations easier. If you have a hard conversation with someone, going for a walk with them while you have the hard conversation is scientifically proven to improve that conversation. When you walk alongside someone and when your gait is matching with someone, you actually feel a closer level of connection with them scientifically. And so it makes the hard conversation easier. It makes you feel more connected to the person. They feel more open to you. It also reduces the uncomfortable feeling of making direct eye contact during a hard conversation, which makes it easier to do. So if you need to have a hard conversation with your partner, go for a walk. If you need to have a hard conversation with a colleague or someone that works on your team, go for a walk and do it. It makes it significantly easier, so you won't want to avoid it.
I love that. My team is also now never going to want to go for a walk with me.
It's like being taken out back. It's like taking old Yeller out back. Hey, we got to go for a walk around the block.
Exactly. Oh, that's funny. It kind of like makes me think about something with you that I think is really interesting too. You are probably one of the more disciplined humans I've met. You do crazy ice baths at like 3 a.m. nonstop when you have to like hammer the ice on the East Coast. It's wild. But if you had to pick like one habit that you do every morning, what is it and why?
Let's see. I've always been very disciplined and routine oriented. I probably have some level of undiagnosed OCD that makes me that way. Like I have always loved the show Dexter because I love, not that he's a serial killer. I should probably caveat that I'm not a serial killer. I guess if I was, I wouldn't admit it. But I've always loved that character because he is so methodical about his routines. And there's something that like I have always found comfort in my routines. For me, my mornings have always been about priming myself for the day. I've always liked that idea of like, how do you prime yourself for the things that you're going to do? The things that I do in the morning now are really focused on creative work, writing. That's when I feel most creative. So like this book got basically written from like 5 a.m. to 8 a.m. over the course of 3 years. And to me, in order to be able to write and be creative at 5, I needed to like get up at 4, and it was the ice bath was like the biggest thing for me. And it was not about the trend and about the social media.
You were doing it before it was cool.
I was doing it before it was cool.
I'll give you some credit.
And I've continued to do it now that it's not as cool anymore. By the way, like that was a trend. 2021 and 2022, it was a great way to get likes on social media. Now, like the people that are ice bathing now are like real OGs.
I actually still like it. I don't post it on social media because I don't need, my ladies all over over the internet, but like it does wake you up.
It definitely wakes you up, and it makes you feel like a badass. And nothing bad has ever come from feeling like a badass. Because when you feel like a badass, when you feel like a savage, when you feel like a winner, that has ripple effects into everything that you do. The way that you engage with the world is different, which is why I always say there's no such thing as a loser who wakes up at 5 a.m. and works out. It has nothing to do with working out. It just has to do with the fact that when you do a hard thing to start the day, if you can convince yourself to do that over and over and over again, you start to interact with the world differently. You rewire your brain to recognize that you are capable of taking an action and creating an outcome. And when you do that, you start to operate better in every area of your life.
Yeah, that's such a good point. You know, I'm pretty disciplined in some areas, but you and Chris are so disciplined physically. Like, it's just a different level. Probably because you were basically a pro athlete. Were you pro? No, you were college, right?
Yeah.
Baseball.
You're selling yourself short.
Well,
by the
thanks.
Way. This morning I woke. So I wake up every day at 4 a.m. It's just my habit. And by the way, that's not me being a hardo saying I don't sleep. I go to bed at like 8. I literally live like an 80 or 90-year-old man. So when I say this like wisdom from old people, I sort of am like, yeah, I'm kind of an old soul at heart. But I woke up at 4 and I had a text from you already that I replied to, and you were like, why are you up? And I was like, why are you up? Don't ask me that question.
Well, I think, you know, what I've struggled with sometimes that maybe people can relate to is physically, I have a different discipline indicator than I do professionally. Like, there's very little work-wise I'm not going to do if I say I'm going to do it. I don't know why. I'm just geared that way. But do you have a tool you use to make habits stick for you? Do you have a rule?
Yeah, I have something that I call my ABC system when it comes to habits. And the idea here is that with any habit you are trying to build, you create an A goal, a B goal, and a C goal. The A goal is your best case. That is the like best version of the thing during any given day. The B goal is sort of a baseline case, and then the C goal is the minimum viable version of it. So for an example, if you were going to try to create a like workout habit, your A goal might be to go to the gym for an hour on a given day. Your B goal might be 30 minutes, and your C goal might be to just like take a 15-minute walk. So the whole idea is, on any given day, if you feel great, you go nail your A goal. If you feel just okay, do the B goal. And on days when you just feel like crap and you don't want to do it, you have to convince yourself to just do the C goal. And the whole idea there is that anything above 0 compounds. We know that financially, right? Like, we know that if we put away $10, that's better than putting away 0. The exact same thing applies to all of these areas of your life. So if you can just convince yourself on those bad days to just do something, it's better than doing nothing. But the hard mindset shift there is, for ambitious people in particular, they think that unless it's optimal, it's not going to be beneficial. And that's just not true. Doing a 15-minute walk is better than doing nothing. Doing the like 10 minutes of focus work is better than doing nothing. So it doesn't have to be that you have the 4-hour deep work routine or the like perfect, morning routine or the perfect diet. Just do the little bit that actually stacks up and compounds.
Yeah. Directionally, I think that's how I set most of my goals too. It's like every single day is there directional forward movement, as opposed to do we hit our mile goal every single day in a marathon? Like, that doesn't really matter to me. It's like, am I moving in the right direction on the same path, and is momentum forward? So I think that's interesting. I remember a billion years ago, I like saw a picture of you on Twitter, and I was like, oh, that's Sahil. And that's Tim Cook. Like, what? Like, how does he know the CEO of Apple? And then I realized this is a thing about you. Like, you sort of have this ability, I think, to get really big, powerful people to quote unquote mentor you without being annoying, right? And I think a lot of people today are like, I want a big mentor, or how could I get somebody like Tim Cook to care about me? How did that relationship start? Tell that story.
So I met Tim for the first time in 2014 when I first started working. I just graduated from Stanford, and I took a job working in private equity. I was going to work 80 to 100-hour weeks, and that was the job. That's what it was going to be. And so I knew if I wanted to work out, I was going to have to go early in the morning. And that meant getting to the Equinox in Palo Alto at 4:45 in the morning every single day. And that meant I had to get up at 3:45 and like wake myself up and be at the gym at 4:45. It turns out that there aren't that many people that are willing to get to the gym at 4:45. So there was a group of like 8 of us that would show up every single day at that time, like waiting for them to open the door. And you would talk to those people because you were with them every single day. So 6 months go by, and I'm like talking to all these people early in the morning. And I was having a conversation with one guy, and I walk away, and someone comes up to me and is like, "Do you know who that is, that guy you were just talking to?" And I was like, "I don't know. That's the guy, like one of the guys that's here." And he goes, "That's Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple." And I was like, oh, shit. Because I've probably been saying the dumbest stuff to this guy for the last 6 months. And look, I wasn't in tech, so it wasn't close to the space. I didn't know who he was because he didn't look how he looks on stage. And he was the relatively new CEO at the time. He was not nearly the level of prominence that he is today. But for 6 months, I interacted with him on a daily basis and was just normal, right? Like I wasn't looking for something because I didn't know who he was, and I'm not like a big transaction guy, so that's just not how I'm wired. After figuring out who he was, we happened to be having a conversation about something I'd seen related to Apple, and I decided I was going to send it to him as a follow-up. And so I guessed his email address and sent it to him. And he replied right away and was like, made some funny comment about if I was as good at other things as at like investing as I am at guessing email addresses, then he's excited to back me or whatever. Like he was just making a joke. And I sort of took that opportunity as a way to get together with him, try to pick his brain, whatever you want to call it. And it ended up sparking what has been an incredible relationship and mentorship. He's been an unbelievable supporter on my journey. He was one of the big drivers of me deciding to leave the path I was on and go down this kind of crazy path. A lot of people don't know his story is really one of like carving his own path. He was on a very stable track in the executive management training program at IBM, long career there. People stay on those paths. They're great. And he decided to step off that and took this job at Compaq, which was a computer startup, like a weird little computer startup. And Steve Jobs was looking for someone to hire and saw his resume and saw the IBM track and was like, oh, weird, big company guy, probably not a fit. Then saw that he had taken this job at this little startup and was like, maybe this guy's actually different than a big company guy because he made this weird decision, this pattern interrupt. And so decided to talk to him, and then the rest was history. He's created trillions of dollars of value. And so I think his map of doing the thing that he was pulled towards energy-wise, even when it didn't really make sense, ended up informing him, sort of giving me some of the courage to go and do this. He's the first blurb on the back of the book now. So he's been an incredible supporter on the journey, but it was truly engineered serendipity in the sense of it was very lucky that I met someone like that, but it was luck that was engineered by the fact that I was waking up at 3:45 every single day for a long time.
What if 2025 wasn't just a year of grind, but a year of ownership and flow? That's the idea behind my first ever 3-day virtual event this February. It's not just a conference, it's a movement, and it starts with you. Over 3 information-packed days, we're going to tackle everything you need to take control, from finding the perfect business to negotiating killer deals to building the mindset of a true owner. This isn't just a theory. We're bringing in laser coaching on real deals and sharing the exact strategies to spot opportunities everywhere. Here's the thing. This isn't about me. It's about Owner Nation, a collective of driven, unstoppable individuals ready to rewrite their futures. This is your movement and your moment to connect with others who are fighting for the same goal, freedom through ownership. No one else is doing this. We've never done it before, and I think it's the first of its kind. So it's your shot to be part of something bigger when it comes to ownership. Visit the link in the description to save your seat, and let's make 2025 the year we own it together.
Yeah, I think a mixture of competency and desire is really rare. And I think not a lot of people realize that. The average person overestimates, I think, how intelligent a lot of people are at the top. And they underestimate how much consistent work over time is the actual path to success. I mean, Tim Cook is probably an outlier, but most of us don't know how to code. Most of us don't know how to create something incredibly unique and differentiated like an Apple. But if we show up at the gym, if we show up every day in private equity, that's actually super rare, which is fascinating to me.
I also didn't want anything. And that, in this modern day and age, I have this perspective that networking is dead. Because it implies a transaction that is not conducive to building real relationships. The number of people over those years that I've known Tim that I saw come up to him the first time and be like, hey, I want to pitch you on this startup, or hey, a job at Apple, whatever the thing is, you have to recognize that people in high positions, their entire life is spent with people coming with their hand out to them. That's their entire life. You are starting to experience that more as you achieve more and more success. You see it, but you can't imagine what that's like for someone like a Tim Cook. His entire life is someone coming with their hand out. So honestly, the fact that for 6 months we interacted when I truly didn't know who he was, built up a base of interactions where he could tell, like, I didn't want anything. The number of times I've ever asked him about something about Apple in my life, I don't even know if I ever have, because I don't care. I'm not looking for a job. I don't want something from him. It is just a genuine desire to learn. He has access to incredible people. He has incredible stories, insights, wisdom. That's what I want. I want to learn from being around these incredible people, understand what makes them tick. And frankly, for someone like that, and I still think about this, he still does it. He is the CEO of one of the largest companies in the world, and he wakes up at 3:45 every single day and goes and works out. That's wild. Baffling. It works harder than any employee that he has working under him. I can't imagine having to work for him and knowing that, like, no matter what I do, I'm not going to work as hard as my boss, not be as focused, not be as driven. It is remarkable. And so we have a lot to learn from people like that, but it comes from being genuine. It comes from actually authentically wanting to create value with no expectation of return.
Yeah. But I think you've done that a few different times. And so I think it's an interesting thing for people to take away, which is like, how do you get the book is amazing. It's right here. I don't know if we can see it on the screen, the 5 types of wealth. And I remember when you were showing me the different covers. I like the one you landed on.
My wife was involved in the design process, which was great.
I didn't know that, actually.
Yeah. She's a designer, so it was great. Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
A Gap,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, she was at Gap, yeah.
You have Tim Cook, Andrew Huberman, Mel Robbins, Arthur Brooks, Gary Vaynerchuk, to name a few. As I was thinking about the book and going through it, there were a lot of ways I could go. And I want to talk about a lot of the frameworks, because I think that's one of the things you're maybe most unique at in the world, which is like, it does seem like you're obsessed with learning. You're like, how do I optimize my life to have this very wealthy life with a broad spectrum definition, but simultaneously do it in the most efficient and effective way possible? But I wanted to start, before I got to some of your frameworks, with, like, what is your favorite story of the book? Like, what's your favorite thing to talk about in there?
I was surprised in the writing process by how much it ended up being a story about the human experience. When I set out, when I signed the original book deal, I thought it was going to be a rather standard sort of framework, simple framework self-improvement book, where you just have the one framework, and then you basically sort of just build it out for 200 pages, and it becomes one of those books that people say well, this could have been a 10-page blog. And it ended up taking this right turn where the human stories were what called me, and telling the stories of some of the people who have experienced wealth in all these different ways in their life, the people that reached out to me, the people I went and spent time with, that ended up being the most powerful thing. And, in particular, there's a woman named Alexis Lockhart who reached out to me basically right at the end of my book writing process to tell me her story of a tragic event that had happened in her life, and the wisdom that it had inspired and instilled in her, that I think ended up sort of pulling together the whole heart of the book. And I feel like that is unique, because as you read it, you will see yourself in one of the human stories. And that's what really makes ideas stick. And so even when I think about sharing frameworks now, I think that frameworks are made so much more powerful by a real human story to connect to around them, rather than just being a big idea.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, for instance, tell me about the bees and your son. I like that story.
Oh, yeah. So I guess this was in May of this past year, we were outside, and my wife was we were playing. I have a 2-year-old at the time, and we're playing, and my wife was there's a bunch of bees around. I'm going to take Roman inside. It makes me nervous. And so we walk inside, and I look out at this tree, and I see a bunch of movement around it, and I'm looking. And then I kind of have this holy shit moment of that entire tree is bees. So I go out and look, and it is this enormous hive. And so I end up going down this rabbit hole, and I sort of live tweeted this rabbit hole of trying to figure out what was going on and how to get rid of this enormous infestation of bees, because I know nothing about bees. I'm not much of like a handyman either. And so like, I'm definitely not going to try to like take this down myself. So I'm like Googling, exterminators, trying to figure it out, realize it's honeybees. Then I'm like learning about honeybees. And the principle there was like sort of a combination of a lot of things I talk about. One being curiosity, and being able to sort of go down the rabbit hole like that as we're going. I'm like trying to explain to my 2-year-old the type of bees it is, and all of these things. And then also just like a reminder that the most interesting content in the world is like journey-based content. We often think that these kind of like engineered moments are the thing that really drives content, but people want to hear about a human journey. They want to hear about like a real experience, something you're kind of engaged in real time. And so whenever anyone comes and it's like, how can I start my content journey? I really do think that the Gary Vaynerchuk like old school model of like documenting is the way to do it.
Yeah, it's also more fun because you're not engineering things.
Yeah.
You're literally living your life and then reflecting on it, which is, I think, how most of us got started. Like, I remember the first piece of content I went out that went viral, I was talking about a laundromat. And like, I literally was like, nobody's really going to be interested in this, but I think this is weird and we should talk about it. And then lo and behold, it becomes this sort of, it has a mind of its own. But I think what I took away from that story from you is like, if you're curious about something and can become obsessed about something, it takes on a life of its own. That mixture of like curiosity and obsession can lead to just about anything you want in the world.
And the coolest thing about that story, which you will love in particular, is so it turned out it was 50,000 honeybees that had formed this hive. And so we had to get a honeybee keeper to come take them away, because you can't kill honeybees, and you shouldn't. They're incredible for the environment. So anyone out there. And a guy comes, a local who makes local honey, and he takes the bees away. And I end up posting about him and his business. He sold out a year's worth of his honey on the back of this thread that had gone viral, and has been like gifting us honeycomb and raw honey as a result ever since, and has become a friend. So Larry the beekeeper, shout out to Larry in Queens, New York.
God, I love a boring business. I had to get like one in, You have also said, PSA, this is from a Reddit post that you reposted. PSA, 20 years from now, the only people who will remember that you worked late are your kids. Now you're a dad. You have a son. How do you mesh that belief with, I've also heard you say before, that you have to earn your seat at the table every day? How do you mesh achieving big things with actually being there for your kids and the people that you love?
Yeah. There are a few realities that need to be considered here. And this tension that we're going to talk about, the tension between presence and ambition, is, I would argue, the fundamental tension of being an adult as a parent. Here's one truth. For 10 years, you are your child's favorite person in the entire world. And after that, they have new favorite people. They have friends, best friends, boyfriends, girlfriends, partners, spouses, children of their own. And you will never occupy that same place in their world. But for those 10 years, you are literally everything to them. And unfortunately, that 10-year period also coincides with the time when you are told professionally that you should be chasing every single version of more that the world hands you to. It's when you are hustling the most. It's when you're traveling the most. It's when you're building the most. And so that creates a real tension between your desire to be present during that magic window of time with your kids and your ambition to go and create things, to go and build something. How you navigate that tension is how you navigate your life with your kids. I have wrestled with it, and I share this in the book in the following way, which is, your children need to understand the why you are doing the things you are doing. That is how you navigate this tension well. Because what kids do is, if you do not tell them the why of why you are excited about the things you're doing, why you are passionate about them, why they matter to you, they fill it with the worst answer, which is that you don't care about them, that you don't want to be around, that dad's never around, that mom's never around. When the reality is, you are being driven by a purpose. You are called to something, whether that purpose is building a huge business, or whether it's providing for the family, or whether it's taking care of people, whether it's impacting the world. Whatever that purpose is, that is the real why. And you need to make sure they understand that. And that answer is really informed by my own experience with my father. My dad is extraordinarily hardworking and driven. He was a professor, a researcher, works extremely hard to this day. He's 70 years old. And my entire childhood, I remember very clearly him working very hard on things he cared about and me always knowing why he was working hard on those things. Always knowing that when he was gone, I knew why he was gone, what he was doing, the talk he was giving, the research he was doing, and I knew why it mattered to him. So as a result, I felt like I was a part of that mission that he was on. I felt like I was on the journey with him. It wasn't that he was gone and I was here. It was that I was a part of it. And so I always say that to parents, young parents, make sure that your kids understand why you are doing things. Embrace that tension, navigate it in the way that you see fit, but make sure your children are on that journey with you so that it's not an us versus them, so that it's all of you together.
There was some sort of societal shift where historically we used to work together with our families. We used to take over family businesses. We used to actually hire our family members. And that was the norm for most of human history, right? It would actually be bizarre if we did not in some way, shape, or form work with and alongside our family. And then, maybe 2 generations ago, 3 max, that changed. And then it became nepotism to hire people in your family. And then it became actually bad for the next generation to pass things down for them. And I'm not sure we weren't told a lie about that. I work with my father now. He actually works with my company in some ways. I was my brother's first job out of college. My mom's worked with me before. And now my husband and I work together. And, Elizabeth and you worked on the book cover design together as well. So I think there's something really beautiful about, I don't have kids, so I can't speak to that, but allowing your family to come along for the ride. It's like, how can you expect them to be happy for you and your accomplishments if they don't know what they are, if they don't understand them, and if they can't touch them, see them, and feel them? So when it comes to parenting, just to stick on this for one more minute, when it comes to parenting, what habits or rituals do you have with your son in order for you to have real quality time, even though you are traveling all the time?
Yeah, I really try to understand and very clearly establish an awareness of the difference between time and energy. And this is a really important mindset shift for all areas of life, but definitely for your relationships. And the difference here is I can spend an hour with you, but if I'm sitting there on my phone, worried about emails, responding to texts, looking at Instagram, you are not going to feel my presence in any way. And we are not going to feel connected in any way. It's similar to what we were saying earlier about having the phone on the table. Kids are the exact same way. They're no different. If you have your phone out in front of them while you're supposedly spending time with them, that hour, they are not going to feel any connection. But 10 minutes of truly present energy, when they are the only person in the world to you, can last for hours and hours in their mind. And so that is really what I try to focus on. It is, I may be in a season of my life where I am unbalanced, where I am like all hands on deck, charging, focused. Right now, I am in one of those, trying to go out and spread the message of this book, which is very important to me. But when I'm there, I am going to be tuned off of everything else, and it's going to be there. Like, I mean, my favorite thing in the world with my 2.5-year-old boy is like roughhousing. I can't be on my phone while I do that, right? Like, he wants to wrestle, he wants to like get thrown around, get tossed up in the air, all of those things. And so it is the most beautiful thing because it forces you to turn off in a very real way. But that same principle applies to all of your relationships. I mean, if you're like, supposedly having quality time with your partner and you're sitting there thinking about a million other things on your phone, the way to think about your phone is frankly just like it is allowing a million people to be there with you while you're sitting with the one person. And you would know if they were actually sitting in the room that you weren't having quality time with this person. But it's the exact same thing. It's just in the form of a technology. And so finding a way to actually separate from it, for me, I actually have to have it in a different room. Like, I can't have my phone in front of me when my son's there if I want to be present. It needs to be in my office in another room so that I can be there. I had I haven't shared this, but I had a moment recently. I was in my office focusing on something, and my son barges through the door, and he's 2.5, so he starts just creating chaos in my office. I'm trying to focus on something. He starts like throwing stuff. He's jumping up on the couch, like throwing books on the ground. And I started having this enormously negative thought pattern of like, why is he doing this? So annoying. I'm trying to focus. Doesn't he realize I'm working? And I snapped myself back to 4 years ago when my wife and I were struggling to conceive. And we'd been struggling for a year or two And I prayed every single night that we would one day have a healthy child. And then here I was in that moment complaining about the very thing that I had prayed for. Mm-hmm. And it was a reminder to me that sometimes the things you pray for become the things that you complain about if you let them. Sometimes you are literally living your prayers, but you're not recognizing it in the moment. You're not allowing yourself to zoom out and appreciate that in the moment. So finding those moments to pause and just bask in gratitude and force yourself to zoom out when you catch yourself doing that, holding yourself to the fire, I just think is so important in life.
Yeah. It's beautiful. Hard, too.
Very hard.
What do you do when you get in those negative thought patterns? When you start to get annoyed, if you want to zoom out, is there a mental exercise you use for that?
I think it's the pause and breathe. It requires a level of self-awareness in moments to be able to hold yourself to the fire. Like, you need to be able to tell yourself the truth. We talked about having truth tellers that can say that to you. But in a lot of moments in life, you're not going to have that person there in your ear. You have to be that person in your own ear. And it means you have to be self-critical enough to do that. Mm-hmm. I do think that, like, in the modern day, on social media in particular, there's been this whole trend of give yourself some grace, give yourself a little bit of grace. And while I agree that occasionally we need to give ourselves a little bit of grace, I think for most people, we actually need to hold ourselves to the fire more often than not. I think we give ourselves too much grace. And look, maybe that's a harsh take, but I just think it's true. I think most of the time you need to hold yourself to the fire a little bit and your life will improve. Yeah.
I want to talk really quickly about some of the frameworks I've stolen from you to make my life better, easier, simpler, a little richer and wealthier. You kind of popularized this idea for me around razors. Like a rule of thumb that simplifies decision-making, but you have quite a few of them. Can you explain what it is and what are some of your favorites and how do you use them?
Yeah. So the idea of a razor comes from philosophy originally. It's something that allows you to shave away possible explanations and get to the heart of something. So the best way to say it is what you said. It's a rule of thumb that simplifies decision-making. The most famous razor, which is probably my favorite one, is Occam's razor, which is the idea that the simplest possible explanation is often the best one. So this is for all the conspiracy theorists out there. I'm sorry. But Occam's razor typically will say that if there is some, crazy thing happening and we want to say that the government is doing some whole like crazy back end, crazy thing, the simplest explanation is like, no, it's just the obvious thing that is happening. The government is not particularly competent. If you have ever flown, you have seen the government in action with the TSA. Or if you've ever gone to try to get a new license, you have seen it at the DMV. That's the government. But all jokes aside on that, Occam's razor is amazing because it's all about the idea that simple is beautiful. And so whenever you have a simple explanation for something or a very complex one that will require a lot of assumptions to be true, usually the simple one is correct. Another one of my favorites for the world of the internet is Hanlon's razor, which says that you should never attribute to malice that which can be adequately explained by stupidity or ignorance. So the second you are in an argument with someone and you start saying like, oh, this person is malicious in their actions or they're in their intent, sometimes it is just ignorance or stupidity. And a lot of the time it's just ignorance or stupidity. That will save you from a whole lot of heartaches and headaches in life.
You know what the other one, it's not a razor, but you sometimes send it to me when I'm pissed off about something on the internet, is I think you should talk about the spotlight effect.
There are two big mistakes in life. Worrying about what other people think about you and believing that other people think about you in the first place. The reality is no one is thinking about you. Everyone is just going through life worried about themselves. Yep. The spotlight effect is this behavioral phenomenon whereby we overestimate the degree to which other people are noticing or observing our actions and behaviors. Basically, we think everyone is looking at us when they're not. Everyone is just worried about themselves. Call it the Zoom phenomenon, because when you're on a Zoom chat, you're so worried about how you look, and then you go look at the statistics, and 90% of the time, people are just looking at themselves. So literally no one is looking at you. You are the only one looking at yourself. And that is true for life. And understanding the spotlight effect is the key to unlocking your own capabilities, because you will be more willing to put yourself out there. There's so much hidden talent in the world that is not putting itself out there for fear of judgment from failure. You're not actually afraid of failure. You're afraid of what other people will think of you if you fail. But no one's thinking about you.
No. And at last, I mean, now that we have a bunch of people on the internet, what I have realized is that even when you are literally the talk of the internet, it lasts 24 hours, a week, max. I mean, a lot of our friends have been huge, scandals, issues, whatever, and then they're gone. It's like a week later, nobody cares about it. And so, but I understand why people worry, because I was talking to a friend of ours, Sri, and Sri, was just getting ridiculed on the internet for I don't know, being Indian and pro-humans, basically. And Sri's about the nicest guy in the world, super competent. And I remember when this started happening to him, I reached out to him. I'm like, hey, man, how you doing? Like, I know how this goes because it's happened to me, not to that degree, because that was a whole different thing with politics involved. But you've had it happen too. The first time it happened to me, I felt like when you are scared about something physically happening to you. There's almost a visceral response that your body has that's like, oh my God, everybody's talking about me online. And it is this, you almost have to overcome it and then realize actually nobody really cares. It was a split second. It's really easy to engage and then you're not worth it. But I understand why people worry, because you can hear about the spotlight effect, and then when the spotlight is even slightly upon you, everything goes out the window.
It's very true. It's also just a reminder. I think it instills in you a sense of humility the first time that happens, because you realize one very sad thing about the world, which is a line from Billions. That's one of my favorite lines. Paul Giamatti's character says it to Axe in the first episode. He says, "Make no mistake, they might be cheering for you now, but they are dying to boo." And those things, when they happen, people come out of the woodwork to boo and get really excited about booing. And it's a reminder that a harsh truth of life is that most people don't want to see you be successful. There are a lot of people out there who say they want you to be successful until you get up to the point where you're more successful than them, and then they're the first ones ready to try to tear you back down. And so to the point that we made at the very beginning on like finding your people that will truly support you and really genuinely want to see you win, they are few and far between. Yeah. And you need to cherish those people, and you need to be that to someone else. And so that's like when you send a text to the person when they're going through that, people never forget who was there for them when shit hit the fan, when they were down. And it doesn't mean you flew there and you have to be there and give advice and do all sorts of things. It's literally just texting someone to say, hey, I'm with you. These fires are happening in LA right now. Sending a text to the person to say, like, I'm with you, goes so far and is so impactful in the way that you interact with the world. And all of this comes to this idea of social wealth, which is like, there is clear scientific evidence that the people you surround yourself with determine your outcomes. Mm-hmm. The Pygmalion effect says that we rise to the level of expectations that others have for us in our circle. So if you are surrounded by people who think you are capable of more, who believe in you, who are telling you to think bigger, who are pushing you to grow, you will rise to the level of those expectations. So what better reason to choose wisely about the people that you have in your circle, the people that you are surrounding yourself with, the people you are gifting your precious energy in your life?
Yeah, it's a really important part you talk about in the book, and I love that study because it's wild. Do you want to talk? I know you talk about it in the book. Yeah. You want to break down the study?
Yeah. The Harvard study of adult development is this incredible longitudinal study that was done over the course of 85 plus years. They tracked the lives of 1,300 original participants and then all of their descendants, so like about 2,000 plus people. And they found that the single greatest predictor of physical health at age 80 was relationship satisfaction at age 50. Not your cholesterol, not your blood pressure, not your smoking or drinking habits. How you felt about your relationships determined your physical health outcomes, how you aged over your course of your life. And so we know, scientifically, we know that relationships are the key to living a good life, a happy, healthy life. Every single person, you go and ask them, what do you want your ideal day to look like at age 80? No one says alone. Everyone says surrounded by love, right? You your partner, you maybe want kids, grandkids, your friends. That's what we all want. And yet, when you ask them what they're doing today, very few are investing in that future. You know to invest in financial wealth. You know that if you want to be rich when you're older, you have to invest every single day. But if you want to have rich relationships, you have to do the same. You have to send the text to the friend. You have to make sure that you are the reason that your group of friends is getting together. You have to spend time with your parents or your partner or your children. These things don't just magically appear out of thin air. You have to invest in them the same way that you do in your financial wealth.
Yeah, that's why I think it's interesting. I mean, you have a lot of different reasons why you focused on the actual 5 levels to wealth here. But I think I want people to read the actual book, but talk high level about, you spent a ton of time researching what are the things that matter? What creates a wealthy life? Why did you choose these 5? What are they? And how is that going to impact somebody's life?
Yeah. When I went on this journey after that conversation that I had with the friend that we talked about earlier, and made this big change in my life, I went on a multi-year journey to try to understand what were the things that contributed to a truly happy, healthy, fulfilling, wealthy life. And the realization there was that the scoreboard is fundamentally broken. Peter Drucker, the famous management theorist, said, what gets measured gets managed. So the thing that you can measure ends up being the thing that you focus on. It's the thing that you narrowly, myopically hone in on and optimize around. Money is extremely measurable. So it becomes the thing that we narrowly focus on. And the truth is that money is a part of living a truly wealthy life, but it is just a part. There are all of these other things that we sort of know in the back of our mind matter, but we don't have a way to measure them. We don't have a way to think about them in the same way. And so as a result, we don't manage them. We don't actually think about investing in them in the same way. That is what I'm trying to change. And so as I came to this idea, this thesis, I went and talked to thousands of people. And basically did 2 things. One, I went to much older people who had lived long lives and talked to them about the advice they would have for their younger selves and how they felt about living a good life. And then I went and talked to younger people and asked what they wanted when they were 80. What did they want their life to look like? This question of what does your ideal day look like? And the thing that you find is that we all want the same thing. And it has very little to do with money. Money is kind of an enabler, but not an end in and of itself. And it was 4 things. It was time, people, purpose, and health. We want time, freedom to choose. We want to feel free. People, we want to be surrounded by love. Purpose, we want to feel like we know what we are doing every day, that there is some reason that we are doing these things. And then health, we want to feel good of mind and body. Money, again, was an enabler to those things, but not an end in and of itself. It was a tool, but not the goal, if you will. And that was how I really came to this idea and this construct of thinking about this new scoreboard, a new way to measure your life across the broader set of pillars that contribute to building a good life. And the thesis is that if you measure the right things, you will take the right actions and you will create the right outcomes. If you measure the wrong things, if you're just measuring for the battle of money, you may win that battle, but you will lose the war of the broader picture of your life. So we need to measure for the full war. We need to measure for the entire picture of what we're doing, and then we'll make the right decisions and we'll create the right outcomes.
Do you think young Sahil, young finance bro Sahil would struggle with talking about love? Did you talk about love back then too?
Talk about love when I was young finance bro. I viewed a lot of things as a distraction to the important thing, which was making money. I was so narrowly focused on external affirmations. And I have this thing in the book, this thing that I call the status test, the bot status test, where you ask yourself when you're about to buy something, would I buy this if I couldn't tell anyone that I had it? If I couldn't post it on Instagram, if I couldn't show anyone? Like, would I buy this watch? Would I buy this car if no one knew about it except me? Usually the answer is no. And what you realize when you start to think about that question is you are living a lot of your life for the benefit and pleasure of other people, which is kind of a crazy thing to think about. Like, how much of my life am I actually living for other people rather than for myself? And so I think that a lot of my life, my whole mental model for life was like, I am going to wake up one day when I have X $1 million and feel happy. And every time I would get to that number and it would have disappeared and it would be some other number. And we have studies to say this. Michael Norton, this Harvard Business School professor, went and interviewed high net worth individuals, people worth anywhere from $1 million on through $100 million plus. And he asked them, how happy are you on a scale of 1 to 10? So they answered. And then he said, how much more money would you need to be at a 10? Across the board, whether they were worth $1 million or $100 million, everyone said 2 to 5x as much. It didn't matter what level they were at, which makes no sense. So we know it's not about some arbitrary number. It is about understanding your definition of enough. Where do you actually need to get to? What does your life look like where you are truly fulfilled? It's not going to be the money. It's going to be what that enables in your actual life in these other areas. I think I really would have struggled with that. That being said, and I need to make this clear, I am by no means saying that money doesn't matter. I am not telling anyone that they should go and, give up their worldly possessions and live in the Himalayas as a monk. If you want to do that, by all means, go do it. I just won't be joining you. I like money. I like being able to afford things. I like having money. I am just saying that it can't be the only thing that you focus on, that you need to invest in these other areas in some way, shape, or form across the entirety of your life. There may be seasons of your life when financial wealth is your primary focus. Yeah. And one of the key concepts in the book is the idea of seasons, the idea that what you prioritize or focus on during any one season can and should change. Your 20s and 30s are a great time to prioritize building a financial foundation for the rest of your life. You talk about this all the time. The fact that you can invest money early and it will compound and grow for the rest of your life. Incredible. You should do that. That's a great season. But when your kids are 5, it may be a great season for you to prioritize your relationship with your kids and sort of be in more maintenance mode from a financial wealth building standpoint, if you make that decision. But the point around all of this is it's up to you. You don't need to accept the default definition of success that the world hands you. You get to create your own. And the truth is you will never feel successful unless you create your own definition of success.
You've got to do that. And, other people aren't going to like it. I think that's the other part that's true. I mean, you know this. I'm terrible at responding to text messages. Why? Because I try to not have my phone on me all the time. Otherwise, I get distracted, and I have a specific agenda and goal for the day. And so if I let even people I love and adore distract me from that goal, then that means I got to work longer. I got to stay later. I can't have dinner with my husband. My husband and my dinner every night is a priority. And so, I think for somebody listening, if they're like, all right, this makes sense. I've seen you personally sacrifice a bunch of career progression things that you could do. At one point, you were raising a big fund and you were going to build another asset management business, which we've both done before. And then you were like, no, actually, I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to think and I'm going to be with my son. Do you have a cost benefit analysis or a framework you use to decide, okay, this is a goal for me or this is an anti-goal?
Yeah, I think it's really important what you just said, which is like, there are trade-offs that you have to make. There are sacrifices along the way. And I have explicitly said no to a number of opportunities where I could make more money because I know what they would require is me being pulled away from this time freedom that I have with my son primarily during this window of time when I'm playing such a special role in his life. That doesn't mean that I'm not going to go all out for those things when he's 8 years old and spending more time in school, or 12, or whenever. Maybe when he leaves the house, when he's graduates from high school, I lean into a bunch of these opportunities. What you decide in the current season does not preclude you from changing in the future season. And look, we made this decision in a very real way when it comes to my wife's path. My wife was on a high-powered designer track, rising through the ranks in a very competitive industry, doing great. And when our son was born, she made the decision that she wanted to truly prioritize being a mom during these early years of his life. Where we live, in the Northeast and in a lot of coastal cities, that was a weird decision. She still gets comments from other moms in town saying, you're just a mom.
Oh, gross.
And we hate it because I think it's the most important job in the world. I think it's remarkable the energy that she puts towards it and the impact it has on our relationship with our son and on his development. But her ability to say, this is one season of life, and I'm going to really be immersed in being a mom during this season. And that doesn't mean that I'm not going to go back and be a designer in the next season. When he's in school and I have more time and he's not home all the time, I can go do that. And I have the freedom to make that decision as I so choose. that is a really empowering way to think about your life, because it's a reminder that there's no such thing as a one-way door. All of these are two-way doors. You can walk back through them, and you can go back and prioritize these other things again. And we need to recognize that more in life.
Yeah. You also have some interesting takes on being married and how to treat your wife in a world where there's a lot of tension between men and women these days. There's tension with traditional, non-traditional roles. There's tension with, God, I've been on Twitter too much lately, but with how people feel about women in relationships and should you have them. When you think about your partnership, she's beautiful, smart, very supportive of you. How did you decide that she was the one? And how do you also think husbands should show up for wives these days?
So before I got married, my mom asked me how I knew Elizabeth, my wife, was the one. And I told her it was because I loved doing nothing with her. And the realization there is that most of life is just sitting around doing nothing. It's sitting on the couch, hanging out, watching shows, really doing nothing. But you create this impression that life is all about these crazy honeymoon moments. It's about the fancy date nights out, the Instagram moments. It's the impression that social media creates for what your life looks like. But the reality is that life is those moments of nothing. So when you find someone that you just love doing nothing with, that is your person. Yeah. That is the person that you want to go and build a life with. And I was very lucky in the fact that I met my wife when she was 14. I was 15 years old when we met.
Good clarification, also given Twitter these days.
Yeah.
Same age range.
Yeah. Sorry. Yes, I was 15. She was 14. And we met in a high school computer lab.
I didn't know that.
The strength that gets built in you when you have grown across different seasons of life, she has been very consistent throughout all of those seasons, actually, as a human. I have not. I was not a person that I am proud of for many of those years. But the fact that she has seen me through all of that,
Were you dating that whole time?
We were dating that whole time.
Wait, since you guys were 14 and 15?
Yeah. She was, I guess, when we started dating, she was technically 15. I was 16.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
You know, Chris and I met
for 7 years. I did
when
know
we
that.
were 11 and 12.
I did know
But
that.
we had a break. Fascinating.
Yeah. We, she has seen me through some dark times in my life. And a lot of times when I was focusing on all the wrong things, and she has really been like a ballast for my ship. And I just think today, as I think about our relationship, especially as I think about my son, one of the highest callings as a father to me, like one of the things I hope for, is I want to know that if I drop dead tomorrow, that my son is going to have an amazing life. And I feel that so strongly, and it is the most amazing feeling in the world to just know that, like, my son would have an incredible life because his mom loves him more than anything in the entire world. And I want my son to know that. And so when I think about that, I always think, like, you can't teach your kids anything. You have to embody the things you want them to learn. Yeah. So if I want my son to treat my wife like a queen, I better damn well treat my wife like a queen. If I want my son to embrace the idea of delayed gratification, he better see me doing hard things for the benefit of something in the future. Every single thing that you want your kids, that you want the people around you to learn, you have to embody those things. Mm-hmm. And so our relationship, I just think that all of this, like every single thing that I am doing, that I'm working on, it is us that we are doing it. She might not be on the cover of the book, but you go look at the dedication, it's on the first page, she's in there. And none of this would be possible without her and without my son and the clarifying force that he has been in my life.
I love that. Yeah. And also I think, today, young people, I think that, like, there's like a loss of hope or something, they think that men like you don't exist. They think that women, maybe like your wife, don't exist. And they think that because they've had a lot of shallow interactions, that is the only thing that exists in marriage. And maybe because so many marriages end poorly, that's all that exists. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really beautiful to share that, because I find the same thing with my husband. Don't get me wrong. We definitely have fights. We have our moments 100%. But I truly believe that a happy marriage is better and more important than a big bank account. And I think your book is a really good representation of it. Doesn't have to be and or. It doesn't have to be or, it can be and. But man, if you had to choose one, you'd probably choose the relationship.
Yeah. And I personally think that having an incredible marriage is the biggest cheat code for making a lot of money in life.
Yeah.
There is something incredible about feeling like you have a house full of love behind you as you pursue your ambitions and as you try to go and build something to make money. And look, I have no desire to be a rich guy by myself. The Forbes top 10 richest people in the world have 13 divorces among them, last time I checked. I have zero desire to be really rich, but have broken relationships with my children. Who knows how many there are out there like that. And so the whole point is we want to build this full, comprehensively wealthy life. We want to make a lot of money, no doubt. I think it's great. You can afford incredible experiences with people. You can build incredible things. But you have to remember why you are doing that. Yeah. It's not for the sake of the money. It's for the things that you're going to be able to create on the back of it. And that's really what this book is about. It's about defining what matters to you and then going and taking action to build your life around those things.
So good. I want to end with two questions, but I love this quote from your grandfather. You're very close to your family, I am too, that said, the worst decisions in life are made when you allow your head to talk you into something when your gut already said no. Is that something that you live by today?
I try to. I don't always. And a lot of the things I write, post, talk about, videos are sort of reminders to self at times, where I will post something on Twitter when I have experienced a time when I have not lived by it and am reminding myself. And I realize if I'm reminding myself, there's millions of people out there that need that same reminder as I do. My grandfather was an extraordinarily wise man. And I feel so much love for him because when my mom is Indian, my father is white from the Bronx, New York. And when my dad wanted to marry my mom, his father was not accepting of it and told him he had to choose between my mom and his family. And my dad walked out the door and never saw his family again. And to this day, I never met my dad's parents. He has 3 siblings I never met. I have first cousins out there somewhere that I never met. He truly rejected the common convention and walked his own path with everything in him. And I imagine it was one of the hardest decisions he's ever made, or maybe the easiest, because he knew that this amazing, now they've been married 42 years. They have a incredible, loving relationship. I cannot imagine my parents not together. But the thing that instilled this love in me for my grandfather was when my mom brought my dad to meet her family, they were initially not super excited about their daughter marrying an American. And my grandfather asked my dad, well, how do your parents feel about it? And my dad said, well, interesting story there. And after that moment, my grandfather ended up taking my dad in as like another son. If someone was willing to leave their entire family to be with his daughter, I think he realized that that person was okay in his book. And I just saw that love and that legacy of love trickle through my family, and the way that my grandfather supported my dad, the way that my dad supported me throughout my whole life. And that has meant more than anything else in the world. And my grandfather's wisdom continues to run through me. I mean, I have a piece of paper on my desk that is one of his most important pieces of wisdom that says, you'll achieve more by being consistently reliable than by being occasionally extraordinary. And I think about that every single day. Just show up and do the work. It's hard to bet against the person who just keeps showing up.
Do you think you can change your life in a year?
Absolutely. I think Bill Gates was the one who said most people overestimate what they can do in a day and underestimate what they can do in 10 years. I kind of disagree. Sorry, Bill. I think most people overestimate what they can do in a day and underestimate what they can do in 1 year. You are 1 year of focus away from people calling you lucky, from people saying, oh, she just got lucky or he just got lucky. 1 year of focus, 1 year of asking the right questions, 1 year of clear intentions, 1 year of focused daily actions. You can change your entire life.
So good. Well, I hope everybody picks up this book. I don't say that very often, actually, as you know, because we're buddies. But I think it's really important, the 5 types of wealth, that we talk so much about money, but damn, I'm doing you guys a disservice if at the end of the day you have a big bank account and that's all you got. And so I'm really glad you wrote the book. SahilBloom.com. Sahil Bloom on all the socials. Anywhere else you want to send people? And it comes out February 4th?
February 4th. Available everywhere. And pick it up at your local bookstore. Let's go support
Is there
someone.
ever a moment where you were like, this isn't going to work? Billionaire multiple times over who's run $100 billion company. How do we steal her homework? How do we learn lessons from somebody who has won so many times in so many businesses? And in the same conversation, she actually is one of the most powerful women of all small business in the US right now as the administrator of the SBA, the Small Business Administration. So not only does she share lessons about what it takes to build a big, huge company, but she also shares lessons about how do you find money hidden in plain sight in the government from the SBA for you, and what is the future going to hold for small business. I'm really excited about this episode. Not very many people get a chance to sit down with the head of the SBA in her office and see behind the scenes what is going to happen to small businesses today. You are going to want to listen to this episode. Kelly, I'm so excited you're here.
Cody, I'm thrilled to be with you.
You grew up on a farm and came from a lot of struggle and strife that only entrepreneurs know. Can you tell me about that time?
Well, it was incredible to grow up on a family farm. And at the time, I grew up in a house that had no upstairs heating. So we'd wake up in the morning in the winter and there would be frost inside the windows. But we never thought that was anything that would be different or wrong with that. We just had electric blankets that we slept under. But I saw how hard my family worked and I was inspired by it. I saw my grandmother writing the commodity futures prices on the Formica countertop. And then when my grandfather and dad would come in for lunch, they'd look at the prices and go back out. And that's where I first got my interest in finance and markets. And I saw my mom and dad building their trucking company together and dealing with the Interstate Commerce Commission filings and the paperwork. And I saw our truck drivers coming over to collect their paychecks while my mom wrote them out. And it really impressed upon me that, wow, they're providing livelihood and they're building something for people, that people are coming to us asking them to haul loads of grain off their farm, not just our farm, but theirs. And my parents sponsored the softball team in our small town. Like I saw and what other small businesses did. And so I also saw how the toll it took on my dad, like how hard he worked, 20-hour days planting crops or baling hay, just the hard physical labor that he did it out of love for us. I mean, he wasn't always able to be at our sports games. And that was totally understood by us. Like that made us tougher. We could come home and say, Dad, we won the game. Here's how it went. And he's like, well, I won the game for you guys today too. And, it gave me a love of work. So I worked in the fields growing up a lot. I worked in our cattle lot. I showed cattle in 4-H. I learned to sew my clothes because if I wanted a nice graduation dress or a dress in college for a formal, I would sew that. And then, all the way to, getting waitressing jobs to fill in for high school and college expenses and having that experience working in small businesses, waitressing, working in retail stores. And that gave me such a strong, well-rounded experience. That's why I'm so honored to serve at the SBA, to serve the small businesses that I know firsthand what they mean on our main streets.
So good. I also think I've met a few farmers, and you guys are totally better at Wall Street commodity trading than the best suits and ties. I mean, I think the drawl is always the giveaway. That's when I know I'm in trouble because they give me a little, well, hey, I don't know about that. And then they know about that. So I got a lot of respect for farmers.
Well, they have a lot of skin in the game. I mean, nothing like having thousands of bushels of a cash crop on your hands to force a decision.
One of the things I was curious about is you and your husband have run multiple businesses together and seem very aligned. What's the secret to doing that?
Boy, that's a great question. First of all, I'm incredibly blessed. That's the first open secret right there. Well, I am so blessed to have met him at a time in my life when, things could have gone either way. I thought, I've been moving around the country for 10 years, taking increasingly more responsible jobs. And I thought coming to Atlanta was going to be another stop on that career trajectory where I was working to find my fitting. I'd just gotten my CFA and had worked in private equity, had worked in as an equity analyst, and then was interested in doing investor relations. And I ended up joining the executive leadership team, ultimately working my way up to that. But we both just connected on our Midwestern values, our love of our families, our work, our shared passion for improving ourselves and giving back. We're both very altruistic, but we're also competitive. So we kind of feed on that. And I'm just so blessed. We get along great. We love talking about business. And we both understand what's important in life. And it's not the monetary. I mean, people make a lot of our wealth or success, but it's something we don't really spend a lot of time talking about.
Interesting. Yeah, you're not very flashy.
Yeah, I drive a Kia Telluride. I do
out of
have
town.
Yeah.
Really? You don't want to roll up in the Lambo?
Made
or the
in Georgia.
SVA?
Well, I'll admit I do. I have a Porsche, and I do love. And because when I was 11, living on our farm, a guy in a Porsche came driving up to drop off something for my dad from a grain elevator, and I was like, "What is that car?" And when I found out it was a Porsche from age 11, I always wanted one. So, I do think it's beautiful engineering and they go fast and I love racing and all that. But I'm most comfortable just driving around town in my Kia Telluride, made in Georgia.
I love that. Also, I'm a bad driver, so I shouldn't be trusted with nice cars. So I'm into that. Okay, so you chose well with your partner. And the only reason I want to ask one more question about partnership, because I think, at least for me, I work with my husband. It's the best thing that I ever did and also the hardest. Our first year working together was really, really hard. And I wasn't sure we didn't make a mistake at first. I was like, oh my gosh, can we really do these two things? And now it's a gift that I feel like was taken from us as society. It was bad to work with your family. It's bad. It's nepotism. It's all these things. And I think that was a giant lie. And instead, it's really beautiful to get to build with your family. What do you think? And what advice would you give some young man or woman out there that could learn maybe what partnership is like in business and love and marriage?
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. It is such a gift. And I saw my parents working together on our farm every single day, building my dad's trucking company together. My dad started it the year I was born after he got out of the National Guard. He'd learned to drive a fuel truck in the Guard and thought, okay, I'll add trucking to our farm, which was transformative for our family, just particularly in the lean years of farming where negative cash flow. And so I saw my mom helping my dad build that business and how amazing it was to have a family that all worked together. And now we're on the 5th generation on our family farm. It's incredibly rewarding, the pride and the ability to work through the challenges together. I think it's something that our country is a little bit lost. And you've pointed that out. I've heard you talk about 80% of people in America in the 1800s were small business owners, and now it's 6%. And I think that's tragic. And I really appreciate all the work you do to encourage entrepreneurship, even though back on the farm and in the small town I grew up in, everyone was an entrepreneur, but we never knew that word.
Yeah, right.
It was just everyone felt like they did what they did because it was their calling.
I think one of the interesting parts about you is you have built all these really big businesses previously, cross-sector, and yet, you started really without a lot, which I'm sure small business owners can relate to. They might hear how big your businesses are and not think that you understand what it's like to be a little guy. But was there ever a moment where you were like, this isn't going to work, I'm totally going to fail, and we're going to lose everything?
Over and over and over. That is essentially it's the setbacks and the rejection that I remember more sometimes. That's what always fueled me. And
do you have a big juicy one?
Oh my goodness. Well, from my earliest time in my career, I mean, I applied for jobs I didn't get. I went back and got those jobs. I've never accepted rejection. I've been tenacious about it. But I've also had huge setbacks, whether it's in working on deals or working on businesses that we thought that was the end of the opportunity, and just kept going. And I think it comes from really how I was raised. I mean, on a farm, you are raised in that situation. You don't have any guarantees, and you figure it out, and you work hard until it's done. And I think just that tenacity really saw me through a lot. And, certainly building a career from Wall Street now into the cabinet, from rural America, I think that just really taught me to dig in, keep going, keep learning, and keep the curiosity about how things work, and keep asking questions, and never accept the first no.
Yeah, you seem like when we were talking kind of behind the scenes, you're like, I like it. I want to be in there. I want to be like making a difference. And I was like, wasn't it scary to run for Senate? That sounds horrifying. You were like, no, like put me in, coach. So you got a little of that inner psychopath. I'm into that.
Yeah.
What about, so you owned an MBA, a WNBA team, which seems incredibly hard in just every aspect, not as much funding, lower ticket sales, and then there was inner turmoil in the WNBA. What was the hardest moment for you running that business?
Well, I think the biggest decision came when my business partner and I, we were 50-50 owners, but before that, we were minority owners. And there came a point where the majority owner decided to sell. And we had to look at each other and say, do we want to step up and be 50-50 owners? And I was running a big part of our publicly traded company at the time. And I had to have confidence in the team that we brought on to really run that business day to day. And also the funding. I mean, it was, it's not an inexpensive endeavor to sink money into that every single year.
Was it public how much that was?
No, but it's a couple million, and it was, we'd hoped to be able to get it to break even, but to the point, back then, the bigger decision was to say, is this a go or no go? And I believe that when life opens a door for you, and like to walk through it, and that life had opened a door for me as a professional sports team owner. And walking away at that time didn't seem like a good option. And I'm really glad we walked through it. We owned the team for a decade. And it was very grassroots. In fact, I was working with a reporter one time and pitching a story. I mean, I was, making sure that we got the visibility. I had this vision because of what I'd seen living in Chicago during the Bulls run in the 90s. And I thought, my goodness, I see what sports do for a community. They really bring it together. And I think Atlanta could be a great sports town. And so we invested on that basis to not have this as a hobby, but to make this a business and a great community contribution. And we were so glad that we walked through that door and did that for a decade for our fans, for our community, to elevate the sport. And it turned out to be such a I learned so much being a sports team owner that applied to business. Because in business, sometimes you can kick the can on a problem. In sports, you can't do that.
Why? Everybody's just yelling at you all the time?
Well, because in sports, the scoreboard shows the results every single day. The ticket sales show the results every single day. The coaching shows the results. And so you have to make those decisions game time. And so I started doing that in business, running my businesses like a coach would run a team. And I became a lot more effective, decisive, and not afraid about what decisions were around the next corner. It just really emboldened me to make those decisions and keep going.
I'm a huge Phil Jackson fan, and it really stuck with me a lot. I read his lessons often on how to be a good leader.
Yeah, the Zen master. Yeah.
He was. I never would have known.
Yeah, he was. He really ran an amazing team. When you read about the dynamics of the Bulls and how the players didn't necessarily all get along, but they brought so much electricity to the court, to the community. And it was just a huge lesson for me watching the Bulls. It was instructive, not just as a sports leader, but as a business leader.
What do you think your leadership style is? Like, you've been successful in WNBA, you've been successful in a Senate race, you're the administrator of the SBA, you've also run these huge public companies. How do you keep winning?
Well, I think it's you learn from the losses. And there's more losses than wins, to be honest. When you get to this point in life, you start looking back and you're saying, I'm really glad for some of those hard times. And some of those hard times were the best times. I think back to when our company was a startup. I mean, today it's $100 billion Fortune 500 company, but when we had 100 people and it was working every single weekend without a single day off, straight through, get there early, leave late, come back, over and over, cancel the vacations. The birthday dinner turns into a due diligence review up in New York. All those things, those were the best times. I didn't need a birthday dinner. I didn't need the vacation. I mean, these were the things that built the trajectory for success. And so I'm always happy to run into the fire. It's why I was able to start a crypto company in 2017, because I love to see a challenge. And I'm so blessed. My husband, Jeff, was the founder of that Fortune 500 company. And he's a visionary who is an engineer. And he takes every problem apart at the nuts and bolts level. And that's kind of how we've worked through a lot of challenges. And, I'm a little different. He's a genius. He's brilliant. I'm more of a hard worker. I didn't have the gifts of the intellect that he had, but I'm a hard worker. That's my superpower. And I have a deep well of curiosity. I love to get atomic level on things. That's why I was the only chartered financial analyst that's ever served in the U.S. Congress.
What?
So, yeah.
Okay, you're obviously smart if you have a CFA. That's like the highest, basically, level financial certification you can have. And the failure rate for like level 3 is something like 90% or something. It's like each level gets harder.
Yeah, well, I worked really, really hard on studying for it. And I made sure I passed every level on the first try. And it was a great challenge. And I love a challenge. And I think approaching everything like this is a challenge I can do makes all the difference, instead of, oh, I'm a victim, I'm a woman, only 11% of the people that pass this exam are women. I just said, I know I can do this. So I think accepting everything as a challenge as opposed to saying that it's all stacked against me makes all the difference.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there was a quote I was reading the other day. Somebody asked Michael Dell, they were like, Michael, how much did you work during those first, few years of building your company? And he was like, I worked all the hours. And so I think, is that what it takes to build a multi-billion-dollar company? Is there any way to build it with a 4-hour work week, a lifestyle business?
No. And why would you want to do that? I think part of the journey of life is creating and building and being with people. I mean, we haven't really talked about the people element. The most fascinating part of what I've experienced over my 30-plus year career is interacting with people, learning from them, and what works, what doesn't, how to succeed. And that doesn't come from just doing deals. That comes from experience at the negotiating table, walking away from it, coming back to it, having the discussions, whether it's internal within our own company. We used to promote internal dissent and debate. And then we'd make sure we pressure test everything internally and had the fights internally before we exposed them externally. And did things before we announced them. A lot of people love to run a company by press release and say, hey, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. No, we didn't do any of that. We would do the thing and then we'd say, we've been doing this for a month and our customers love it. So I think, walking the walk, not just talking the talk, was so important. And it's about making sure that you have people that are bought into the vision for doing the work, not, taking the victory lap.
Yeah. How do you foster dissent in an organization? How do you get people to like competing for the best ideas?
Well, I think it goes back to the original question you asked me about what kind of leader am I? I'm a hands-on leader. I try to run as flat organizations as we can. Like, we're all on the same team. Like, the team first concept is we're all in this together. If you fail, I fail. And so I want you to succeed. And that's why I am really careful about the teams I pick. And, loyalty is important, but you're being loyal to me if you say, Kelly, I don't think that's a good idea. It's not disloyalty. I don't want to be encircled by yes men. I want people to say what you're doing is maybe not the optimal way to do this. Have you thought about this? And I may take it on board. I may not, but I'm like, thank you for letting me know. I'm glad we've had this conversation. And so I think just really encouraging communication and dialogue. I feel like someday communication is going to be a lost art within the business world.
It does feel like that. But, and maybe that does go back to, sort of this
You've played a lot of games where you either won or lost publicly. Running a public company, got to have quarterly results, WNBA, nightly scoreboard. And so unlike a lot of people in the government, you're like, no, there are consequences to my actions, which is kind of shows across all of your businesses. So if you're talking to a small business owner right now who is worried about inflation and what's happening around them, what would you tell the people that you're about to see on the street?
Well, the great thing about small businesses is they live in a very dynamic environment. And so I hear from them all the time as I travel across the country. And what I'm hearing is that they want taxes to be made permanent, the tax cuts to be made permanent. They want taxes to be low. They want regulations cut. They want fair trade. They're excited about the conversation we're having on making America produce things again, onshoring our manufacturing. And I also think small businesses need a focus on skilled workforce by education. I mean, we really need to look at our educational system and say, what are the skills and the trades of the future? And so that's critically important because so many small businesses can't fill roles, can't find the skilled workforce. So we're working with small businesses across that entire spectrum to make sure that they have the resources they need. Chief among those at the SBA is access to capital, which is our bread and butter, to help small businesses access lending through our partners in the private sector, your local community bank, or things like a credit union, and making sure that they have the lifeblood of their business, which is capital.
Yeah. So do you think that you guys, as an administration overall, will small business owners get those permanent tax cuts? Will there be like a pro-small business environment? Because lots of people say they love small business. But do you think that is actually going to happen?
Well, look, there's no bigger fan of small business than President Trump and this administration. And I do believe we're working quickly toward Congress having that 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act extended, hopefully made permanent. That will provide tremendous certainty for small businesses to invest and grow and hire and drive our main streets. And I believe manufacturers and businesses of all kinds are really spring-loaded, just waiting for that tax cut to come through. But in the meantime, we're working really hard on deregulation because regulation, and in fact, the Biden administration passed $1.7 trillion in regulations, setting an all-time record by many multiples of massive regulation. That's a tax on small business, disproportionately on our manufacturers as well.
Yeah, we were reading some statistics earlier about how that is somewhere between $8,000 and maybe some other people say $15,000 per employee by federal taxes on small businesses. So there's a real regulatory drag, it seems like.
Yeah.
And so, let's talk a little bit about the things we can control, because I think sometimes hearing about everything the administration is going to do, you're like, great, I'll keep working while we wait for that. So one of the cool things you guys have done is what I call like showcasing money hiding in plain sight. So the SBA obviously provides tons of loans to small businesses. What do you think most small business owners don't realize they have access to with the SBA that they do? Where is your like hidden free money?
Well, actually, that's a great question. I actually think the SBA is not well understood. What we do is provide government-backed guarantees to private sector loans and loans that may not be extended but for that government guarantee. And what I love about these programs is they're self-funding. They're not taxpayer funded. When run properly with the right underwriting guidelines, these loans pay for themselves while generating access to capital for the small business, growing the tax base, driving employment. So it's a really free enterprise / private public partnership type thing that is unique in government. Usually it's government giving a grant. What we focus on is making sure that qualified businesses who can't get capital elsewhere can get them through the SBA, those loans. And that's what I'm really proud of, is that we're making these loan programs better and more accessible.
Yeah. And so if you're a small business owner listening right now, like, is there any downside to going to your local SBA office and just saying, hey, I want to see if I could be pre-approved for a loan for
X or Y or Z? Like, should every small business owner be at least meeting with their local SBA?
Absolutely. So we have 68 offices across the United States at the SBA. And what you can do is start having those conversations. Maybe you don't need capital right now, but you need access to some of the counseling that we do through our small business development companies that really help small businesses build toward accessing capital or planning their expansion. And we can work across the federal government to connect them to other resources that, as you say, capital hiding in plain sight. Like, could there be other programs? The SBA also oversees government contracting. We have to ensure that small businesses get about 23% of federal contracts. And we have programs to help them onboard into federal government contracting, which I'll admit is not the easiest thing to navigate in the world. And we're trying at the SBA to demystify that and make sure that it's really small businesses that are getting that benefit.
It's so good. So we'll put it in the show notes. You should definitely go to the SBA. We'll link where the field offices are. No downside to saying, how could you guys help me? And the entire job of those field offices is to give you resources. That's what
right.
they're paid to do.
That's right. And we have lending folks in our offices that can help direct you to what those loan services are, or they may say maybe what you want more of is more of the counseling side and working with our partners in that.
Yeah. And can they help you put together a package to actually get money? So if you're like, hey, I want to get a loan from the SBA, here's sort of what I have. Can they look at it and go, well, you should beef up this part of your business plan. You should think about it this way?
Yeah, so the lender relations specialist in each district will, kind of navigate you through that program. They'll connect you with a lender. We actually have an online lender match service that you can access as a small business just through our website and see if there's a lender that might be, interested in your type of sector or type of loan. So you can do it that way too, even if you don't want to go into an office.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I also know that you guys have a list of like the top 200 or something most common lenders with the SBA. So you can kind of see who is playing this game often. I think a lot of times people are like, the SBA loans are really hard to get, which is true in some ways, but also it might be because you're going to a lending institution that doesn't actually work with the SBA and they say they're a big lender, but they're in the bottom quartile. And so if you go to people who are at the very top, and I won't name names, so everybody's our buddy, but it seems like if you go to people who already do the thing, then they will have a higher likelihood of getting approved for the thing.
That's very true. And then there's also just the fact that these are government guaranteed loans. Certainly the lender takes the first loss. So these are underwritten to traditional private sector lending underwriting standards. But at the same time, we have to ensure that they're underwritten so that the government isn't put in the position, or the taxpayer, which is also a small business, is put at the position of funding losses. So we want to make sure that portfolio is performing as it should. And generally it does. We operate a $444 billion loan portfolio at the SBA.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
You also have incredibly low default rates.
Yes.
I think actually, what surprised me is a lot of people, we teach thousands of people how to buy businesses and we use SBA loan programs all the time. And people were like, normal people can't buy a business. The loans, they're underwater. You have this personal guarantee. It's so big and scary. And it is. It should be. Anytime you take somebody else's money, you should be really thoughtful about it. But, your loan rates are incredibly low. So I also think the SBA is a great filter for, should you even buy this business?
That's right.
Right? If the SBA won't approve it, is it good?
That's right. And I have talked to a number of business owners who have said to me, I got my first loan through the SBA. I would not be in business today. I was a sous chef. My wife was a teacher. We barely had any assets, but we had a great idea. They got an SBA loan, but they also said we were never so happy when we paid off that SBA loan. And it gives them the discipline and the confidence to get into business and then start repaying that loan.
Yeah, and now you guys have done some interesting things where I saw for the first time ever, you can start to have multiple people on an SBA loan to diversify some of your single party personal guarantee risk, which I think is really lovely for people who don't have a lot of assets.
That's right. We've tried to make the programs, make sure that they are performing well, but make them realistic for how deals in the private sector actually work. And a lot of times when you have people designing loan programs that haven't been in the private sector, that don't understand how deals work, that they may not have that flexibility. So we're trying to make sure we have the belt and suspenders on the underwriting standards, but also make sure that they work in the real world.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate it. I think a lot of times the SBA loan not going through was a benefit to the buyer of the business and they didn't even realize it.
Well, and that's right. We don't want to saddle people with loans and potential defaults and bankruptcies that we could have foreseen by having the prudent underwriting standards, which we just put back in place at the SBA, and that will strengthen the programs back to where they were.
Yeah, I like it. What would you say to people who say, man, the SBA loans take too long, and so they kill my deals, or I can't buy a business because they're not fast enough?
Yeah, I hear that, but I also think that is where we need to make sure that we have the right lender on the program, and that's why our lender match program was developed to ensure that borrowers are talking to a full spectrum of potential lenders. But also, we are being self-critical and looking at where do we have too much red tape and bureaucracy, and how do we run this like the business that our small businesses have to operate. They have to do more with less. They have to navigate all kinds of bureaucracy. We should be the last place that they're encountering massive red tape. So we are taking a hard look at that. And we actually set up a red tape hotline at redtape@sba.gov to let our small businesses tell us where are they struggling, not just in the loan process, but where are federal regulations weighing them down needlessly. Because I saw it firsthand when I was in the Senate. Like, there's a lot of focus on legislating and rulemaking and regulations. There's not a lot of focus until we got to DOGE about how do we roll some of that back. And President Trump is leading the charge on that again. He did it in 2016, eliminating multiple regulations for each new one. We're doing it again, at least eliminating 10 for every new regulation. And that's something that I think is picking up momentum, not just in the federal government, but in the states where there's also a lot of regulation.
So let's look into the future. If they don't get access to somebody like you, now they get to sit and listen and hear from you on what is the future with this administration with small business, and what are some of the initiatives that you think are going to be really incredible for small business owners.
One of the things I'm most excited about is our Made in America manufacturing initiative at the SBA, which amplifies President Trump's America First agenda. And what does that mean? It means we're creating opportunities in America that had been hollowed out from us over the last 3 decades, where we lost something like 70,000 factories, 5 million jobs in our manufacturing heartlands are gone. We can do that again in America. And I have been across this country going through factories and hearing from owners of, and these are small businesses, most manufacturers, 99% of them are small businesses. And they've been telling me, I have been fighting the notion that we can't make things in America for 2 decades. And it's happening. And I see it as tremendous opportunity for small businesses because they supply the larger producers with the subcomponents and the parts and the materials that they need. They provide the restaurants for the workers. They provide the retail stores. I think we're on the cusp of not just a manufacturing, but an America First renaissance in this country. And I hope everyone will be a part of it, because I think if we can get the tax cuts done, the deregulatory agenda continuing to advance, we're on really at the dawn of what President Trump says is truly a golden era, because for too long, people have underestimated the American worker and American industry. And we're getting back to that now.
I get chills. Well, I'm so appreciative of your initiatives to push forward small business. I can tell because I've met with your staff and other members of your team that you guys are actually really pushing for the little guy. And so I hope people take you up on all the initiatives at the SBA and go and look at the resources and meet with your local members. And then also you guys do an incredible job highlighting content too. So if there's like companies that, are small businesses that want to get highlighted as well, I know that there are spaces on the website there. Administrator Loeffler, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Cody, it was great to be with you. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. If you want to see all the resources we talked about today, we actually compiled them for you into this little report. If you want that, then click below. You can get the link right here for all the SBA resources. If you guys liked this episode, wait until you see the one we have coming next. If you are not subscribed to the podcast, like apparently something like 60% of you guys are not right now, we are missing out. You guys are going to want to have a notification for the next podcast, because we are going to find more hidden money and we are going to hear from more world leaders to see how you can change your life and your business. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. We called this podcast The Big Deal because you are a big deal to me. No matter how small your business is or how big your business is or how big or small your life is, you really matter. And I hope you felt that in this episode. We are here to make sure that you continue to have the thing I believe leads to more freedom than anything else, which is money. think that's the lifeblood of small business, is making sure cash flow stays in. And I think that is the answer to freedom for most people, is when you have more cash, you can actually architect the world around you. And so I want to thank you for being with us in this podcast. It means the world to me. And I just want you to know that we do everything in our power every single week to make sure that you are still the biggest deal on this podcast. We'll see you next week.
What is a think tank, and what influence do they even have on Washington? And what was your purview of seeing in through that lens to the center of power?
Yeah, and that's generally been my lens into that world, is I've always been more of a policy person first and a political person second. I mean, when you work in a think tank, especially in Washington, D.C., you have to deal with politics because the people whose attention you're trying to get are politicians or their staff. Really it's political leaders and the media are kind of your two main audiences. And so a think tank is like a catch-all term for a certain type of organization, but they really exist along a continuum. And they're usually a combination of research, a general set of principles that the people who work there tend to agree on, and then a goal of taking that research and their commentary and their writing or their podcasts and to influence the public debate. So to change the way that policymakers are thinking about tax policy, education policy, what to think about Israel right now, how do we resource the effort in Ukraine or not, and all those things. And some think tanks are a little bit more political in the sense that they're really trying to influence how politicians in this particular cycle think. Some of them have sort of house views where all the scholars kind of have to sing off the same song sheet in their work. And then some of them, like the American Enterprise Institute, where I was, the scholars, it's a little bit more like a university where the scholars are, they have independence. They don't get told what to write or what to say, but they work at AEI for a reason. They believe in the principles of a free society. They're wary of regulatory intrusion into the commercial market space. So people would say, well, they're free market people, but they are. But they're across a continuum as well in terms of some will favor a particular type of regulation while others oppose it, and sometimes AEI scholars have disagreed in public, and I've always liked that about the place. But you see think tanks to the right, to the left, who are a little bit more politically driven in terms of their mission, but they all kind of get called think tanks because they generally bring people that have some kind of academic training or some kind of expertise within policy, and their goal is to influence the way that policymakers and the media think about those things.
Well, I don't think I realized before I started getting involved with any of this stuff that there's that joke in Washington, D.C. that all the policy is written by 20-year-old staffers.
Yeah, right.
And
far from the truth.
Right. What's interesting, I think, is as a person outside of the spectrum, you forget that half of the policies are like these 17,000 page, overwhelming pieces of paper to people who may only be in office for like 1 or 2 terms, really don't understand the political apparatus, don't know how to make real change. And so they might come to a place like AEI or reference your research to say, like, please pull me 15, different ideas on how to make a city more profitable and better to live in. But they're not pulling it from like the Wall Street Journal often. Right. They're pulling it from academic papers, just like a scientist or a doctor might do the same thing before they prescribe something for a patient, right? Is that kind of how that works?
I mean, there comes a point where if you are, just for example, writing the text for the 2017 tax reform bill, there were some crazy ideas in that original version. You're not going to actually figure out what to think reading really smart writers at the Wall Street Journal or whatever, because their job is to cover it rather than to do the analysis. And so at times like that, Hill staffers, some of whom are in their 20s, and then the more senior ones hopefully are older than that and have some expertise. Now, you have some long-standing members of committees on the Hill who really are policy experts, and everybody kind of looks to them. But then they'll look to a think tank like AEI or some of the others and ask the scholars who have expertise, say, in these aspects of tax policy, to come in and brief them on what their own analysis, their own modeling, their own regressions, like what they see if we include this one particular provision. And so all think tanks in Washington have a lot of public events, that, you can live stream them, you can come and hear scholars talk. But I always felt like the most important work that we did was the stuff that wasn't on camera. It was the stuff that was behind those closed doors in meetings where people were debating whether or not this particular provision would have this kind of effect on the economy. And that's where you have the most influence. I mean, during the COVID relief bills that, when we were all kind of trying to figure out what was going on with the the pandemic and exactly what the right federal response should be. Again, a lot of bad ideas out there, and they needed to sift through exactly what the right kind of stimulus or not should be for the economy. And our scholars were involved in those discussions, and I think had an outsized influence on the results, whether you like them or not. I mean, that's when think tanks can really shine, is at times like that, where you realize there are people who realize this is a really big deal. Put politics aside right now. We're trying to figure out what the right policy is. And then you need some experts to come in and do that work. And in universities, where I am now, and I love the university world, and we're building something similar at the University of Texas. A lot of people that are tenured professors in a department, they don't have experience converting their research into kind of policy briefs or whatever. And that's what think tanks can do for them, is to take their research and make it digestible for people that are trying to figure out the consequences of some decision.
I love creating content, obviously. We post like 50 pieces of content across all my platforms each week. But if you've ever created content, you know the uphill battle it can be to ideate, write, produce, and film a video. And then you have to edit it all. So one of my favorite tools to use for this is Riverside. You've probably heard about it before. It's really revolutionized the podcast space by allowing creators all over the world to record 4K video regardless of the internet speed. But they've just released an update that any creator is going to love. So along with recording high quality video and audio, they've added in editing software so you can edit any video content directly in Riverside. If your team is a little more bougie like mine and wants to record the video themselves, you can upload your own content to Riverside so you can use all of their amazing AI tools. It can transcribe your video and add in customizable captions. It can analyze that transcript to cut out the dead space in the video. And my favorite part, they have this AI editor feature that will pull short form clips from my content so we can squeeze all the juice out of what we create. Time is money, and Riverside has given me and my team back loads of time, aka money. So I love them. And because I love you, I got you guys a deal. Try Riverside for yourself with the link in this episode's description. You can sign up for free using the link and discount code CODY at checkout for a discount on any paid plan. By the way, the first 1,000 people who click on this link and use the coupon code will get an exclusive 30% off with code CODY30 with the QR code on the screen. Even our doggo likes it. Let's get back to the episode.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I remember one of the more interesting things we ever did was we sat down at AEI and you guys put us through a war game with China and Taiwan. And before that, I didn't realize that that's what happened when we sometimes explain things to policymakers, where even that might be what happens inside of the Pentagon. Can you explain what a war game is?
Yeah, it's a way of creating in this case, a geopolitical sort of scenario, and giving people the opportunity to understand that if you make one particular decision, they invade, they don't, our response is this kind of air power, this kind of naval response. That means we're moving resources from some other part of the world, for instance, right? And so you actually start to realize what's involved in these decisions. It's always trade-offs, right? And so when you're engaged in kind of a large-scale military effort, it means there's other capabilities that you don't have elsewhere in the world. And so war game, it kind of puts people in that scenario and makes you understand from a cost perspective, from a personnel perspective, what sorts of decisions that might seem easy if you're just watching a cable news show all of a sudden becomes super complex. And we've used it in other scenarios too. I mean, I worked in the George W. Bush White House for a few years, and I was there during Hurricane Katrina. And, we realized that there were certain war game scenarios that had been played out before that had relevance to that time. When you have 500,000 people displaced from an urban area, this was not too many years after 9/11, where we thought that something like a dirty bomb could happen. Like, what would happen if a radioactive bomb went off in a city and now all of a sudden 500,000 people couldn't live there anymore? What would you, first of all, there's the site, but then there's the dispersion of people. And we were faced with a situation because of what happened in New Orleans, that you basically did have 500,000 people no longer living there that went to Houston, or they went up to Tennessee, or they scattered about, and there wasn't a really great preset federal response for how to actually get resources to people so that they could, stay in hotels or pay their rent or get the resources that they need because of this horrific event. And you can use that type of war game precedent to actually make decisions. So it's helpful in terms of guiding policy, but it's actually really interesting to participate in, as you saw.
Wait, so how does that work? So basically, you're an advisor to the president at that time in the White House, and you guys are trying to figure out what to do with Katrina. Do you go to a file and you're like, here's all the historical war games we've done?
I wish.
Option one.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping for. I found that war game, there wasn't an exact war game that really prepared the federal government for that. I had kind of hoped that the dirty bomb scenario would like create some off the shelf stuff. Got us a little bit of the way there. But that was a situation of making policy kind of on the fly with imperfect information. And this is a time when you do also rely on rely on policy experts around the country. I mean, we were calling people who had written papers about this type of scenario, who had studied like what kinds of federal resources could be used most nimbly, and we had to make some decisions in a really short period of time. And President Bush wanted to have a really large response to this issue, and he had a plan of being out like in New Orleans within 10 days, and we had to have a bunch of big policy proposals. So we made a lot of decisions really quickly. Some of them were mistakes, in terms of the right kind of federal response. But that's different than when you're preparing for a State of the Union address, maybe 6 months ahead of time, where you got a lot of time to plan. So you're always looking for outside expertise. No administration has all that expertise within the White House or within the Office of Management and Budget. It just doesn't exist within one administration. And so you're always looking for people outside who know more about this issue than you do, involving them in the policy process. And so that's where think tanks come in. It's where people that have a perch at a university who are really good come in. And you find in those jobs that you really need those people. I was there during the run up to the financial crisis too. There's a housing crisis that preceded the financial crisis, and that was the same thing where really, really smart, well-known, published economists had very different views about the reality of that situation. And it was really, really hard to know what to do, because some of the smartest people in the world whose advice you were relying on just saw this in sometimes 180-degree different ways from each other. But you still need to talk to those people, and you still need to make smart decisions. And if a White House is running well, it takes expertise actually very seriously.
Yeah, it's such a good point. I mean, my friend Tim Kennedy, do you know him?
I don't.
You should have him to Civitas. But he's a active member of the military, but he was one of the people that went in for Pineapple Express, remember, in Afghanistan. And then he brought a group of people with Sabre allies to go get people out of North Carolina. And he was talking about what it looked like, on the ground there. But it's really interesting to think that, if you're in business, you might go to Harvard Business Review and look at the historical case studies and say, we have something going on here, like which other company has it ever been through? And you might pull some of those ideas to think like, could we solve it? Mm-hmm. I had never thought about, does the White House have like components that are like that?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, you find you get thrown into these jobs and everything's moving so fast, and you have all the things that you're supposed to do that day. And then by 10 a.m., there's 4 more things that you hadn't planned on when you got up that morning to deal with. And so people's ability to focus for a long period of time on really important things is actually really limited. I mean, time is an amazingly scarce resource. And so having worked in that environment has given me a lot of sympathy for administrations that have come, after us, because when something big is happening in the world, and there's a lot of media criticism for what seems to be like double messaging coming out of the White House, or the administration doesn't seem to have its act together. I'm like, it's probably because they don't yet. Like they actually have had a couple advisors go out in front of cameras saying different things from each other. And maybe the president didn't even know they were out there saying that because they're trying to formulate a response. I mean, it sometimes just happens in sort of a chaotic way because of everything that's going on. So a smartly run administration kind of prepares for that. And you try to kind of pick your experts in advance, people that that you can trust, to get a good catalog of people around the country on a variety of issues, and hope your policy councils are all doing that. We used to have, like every summer, we would have the heads of think tanks from around Washington and also even outside, just handpick some of their own scholars and bring them in for like a 90-minute briefing. And we'd have the president's economic advisors, domestic policy, homeland security, national security. They would sit in a room and just let them kind of tell us about like what they saw as kind of big issues in the world, and they would become sort of a resource after that for our staff, because you can't staff that up internally very well.
No, I remember hearing something crazy that I don't remember if it's true or not. Is it true that the Pentagon has run like, I don't know how many war games about China versus the U.S. and we don't win in any of them?
I don't know
Taiwan.
That. Yeah, I don't know that. I hope that's not true.
I didn't sound very good.
Yeah, there's got to be a scenario within which we win, but I don't know.
Yeah, I remember Mackenzie, one of the scholars, was talking about that we didn't win any when they did it with the Senate and Congress. So like war games were run between the two groups and they didn't win any. But I was hoping, I mean, you would think the Pentagon wouldn't let that out either. They're not, I imagine they're not gonna be like, the thing is, we're preemptively losing.
Yeah.
That's probably not a good idea.
Yeah, that's right. Or maybe that's what they want people to think.
Man,
Yeah.
it's 3D shows.
Yeah.
This is why I stick to business. Okay. There was one other thing I wanted to talk about. You literally just got on a plane back from DC, and you were there all week. What's the vibe like there right now? Is everybody freaking out?
It wasn't as crazy as I thought it would be. Yeah, I mean, this trip was planned for a while, and so I kind of expected to be there, and they'd still be counting votes. You know, I didn't expect it, like everybody didn't really expect this to be resolved the evening of. It just depends on who you talk to. There's a lot of panic among Democrats. There's kind of a strange amount of optimism among people on the political right. I think probably when I say surprising, I think it's more people that have been Trump skeptics, Trump wary, and even anti-Trump. I think there's a number of them now that's like, well, we've seen this show before with him, and there's also some real opportunity for maybe some disruption and reform in areas where we need that. And he's got his issues that he's really hyper-focused on, but that means there's opportunity within his administration elsewhere to get all kinds of other things done that are broadly aligned with what he cares about. So it's kind of an interesting, it was an interesting time. I mean, I think everyone's just kind of sitting there just nervously waiting to see what happens. And, you know, you go from one day where like Marco Rubio's name is floated for Secretary of State, and everyone's like, well, that's a good decision or whatever. And then the next day he puts forward Matt Gaetz as Attorney General. Everyone's like, what in the world is going on here? So it's like, here we go again, you know, sort of chaos and disruption. So there's kind of just nervous expectation, and some people are kind of nervously optimistic and others are nervously really, really worried right now. So like everything else over the last few months, all we can say is who really knows what it's gonna look like there come January. It's hard to say. And with John Thune becoming the Senate Majority Leader, that creates maybe a little bit of a break on the sort of MAGA elements in the Senate, because that was a hotly contested race too. Is Trump going to be able to get all of his people rubber stamped? Is he going to run into opposition within his own party? And I think given that vote, that's possible. So that'll create some dealing even within the GOP when it comes to appointments and decisions that are being made kind of early out of the gates.
Yeah. What about, well, first of all, I have been watching Twitter like it's prime time. I mean, I can't ever remember watching every cabinet position and say, like, who's it going to be? What's going to happen next? I think it's an American phenomenon that is reminiscent probably of like The Apprentice. I mean, it is incredible.
I think that's what they want you to do, right? Yeah. I actually got off Twitter before it became X. I mean, I burned out on it. Yeah, I got to the point where I realized I don't even like the people I like anymore. Yeah. My friends on Twitter who I've long loved and followed, I'm like, I don't even really like them anymore, so I'm just going to, I want to keep liking them, so I'm going to stop watching them on Twitter. And I hung it up. And to be honest with you, I've not missed it. I mean, I go there because people will make announcements there, or a lot of times in my world, there's a really interesting study that gets released, and someone tweets it out. So I find myself going over there for content, but I can't do it anymore because I used to do that too. I mean, election nights on Twitter used to be really fun, because just listening to everybody's hot takes. No,
Zero watching X.
No.
Wow.
No, just watch the returns and stayed off of people's, hot takes and, all that stuff. Yeah, decided to sit it out. I felt a lot happier and better.
That's very mature of you.
No, I don't know it's mature. It was just some self-awareness about what makes me a better and worse person.
Well, I want to talk about what you're doing today, because one of the reasons I want to have you in here is because we talk about it a lot, but, the university system, it seems to have a lot of problems today. And, from us watching student protesters pro-Hamas at NYU to watching what happens with, different racial divides at school, to wondering if students and teachers are really learning these days. From an outside perspective, the university system kind of appears broken, or at least under attack in some way. And you decided to start the Civitas Institute at University of Texas. Why? And what do you think you guys are going to be able to do different from inside one of the world's largest universities, University of Texas?
Yeah, the Civitas Institute is a great new creation. It's created to essentially be part of a much larger effort to kind of reclaim a place within this large Tier 1 great esteemed public research university, to kind of recover the basic principles of the American founding, of a free society, of the kind of commercial and economic life that supports and is the lifeblood of that society, to teach it in a historically accurate and proper way, and to do research that kind of advances these ideas and helps us understand what a free society should be looking like in the future, and what a growing and dynamic economy should look like in the future, and where we can make reforms possible. So Civitas, the best way to think of it is kind of a university-based think tank committed to those principles. So I've come from a think tank in Washington to build this organization into a similar type of thing at a university, which gives you access to all the research power of an institution like this, and really great faculty and experts from around the country to be a part of it. We are joined at the hip with this other a really important new effort called the School of Civic Leadership, and now technically housed within that school, since institutes and centers typically have to be housed within a degree-granting college. And this is a really exciting effort. The school is about a year old. It was created by the regents about a year and a half ago, and so it goes through a process of getting stood up, where a dean gets appointed. That's Justin Dyer, a great political scientist who's the inaugural dean of the school. And we've been hiring faculty into the school. And so we have gone through our first round of faculty hiring this year. Those people have shown up this fall. We're going through another round now. And by about the third year, we'll have about 20 full-time faculty teaching in the school. And the school is very much committed to constitutional studies, Western civilization, economics. It has elements of what people are familiar with the British PPE model of education. It's kind of, it's a philosophy, politics, and economics. It's like, I think every prime minister going back to who knows what did that at Oxford. It's a great way of getting a well-grounded education in these topics. That we don't call the degree that. We have a minor that's called that. The degree is called Civics Honors, and it combines these great elements of what we would think of as a really strong classical liberal arts education. And so we have the school that will have its inaugural freshman class next fall. And then we have the institute, which I run, which is standing up a whole bunch of different research programs and events on these issues of economic dynamism, political liberty, constitutional studies, and a bunch of policy papers on energy policy, education policy, a number of different types of things like that. So why is this important?
And why is it different?
Yeah.
Because a lot of schools have economic departments. They have history departments.
Yeah.
So at face level, people could be like, this exists already. What is any different about it?
So what's different about it in the School of Civic Leadership is the multidisciplinary aspect of it. So you can, the best way to think of, I think, the new School of Civic Leadership at UT is think of it as kind of an elite, small liberal arts college on this large public university campus. So this where students are studying these things together. Part of the problem in higher education today is just the fragmentation of studies. And so you can study American history without really ever studying the Constitution or without ever taking economics at a lot of universities. And this is a way for students, if they get enrolled in this school, they apply to come to UT and study in this school, this is their major, they're going to get this multidisciplinary degree. And I think that, I think we'll attract a lot of students that want to go to law school or that want to get their MBA. I think we'll get a lot of students that want to go on and do graduate studies in policy, or they want to teach. I think it'll attract that sort of a student, and we're out putting out the word to get people to apply. And I think we have a lot of students coming from areas where they're just interested in the history of American institutions, and they're interested in the way that the economy is and the way it should work, and they want to study all those things together. There has been, I just think there has been this drift in higher education over the last generation to monocultures, where there has been this move of sort of political leftist ideology, which has become entrenched within universities. And I say this as a historical and empirical matter. There have been a couple of books written about this, or people done lots of surveys, and it's just a matter of fact that the political leanings of faculty have really moved to the left since the 1960s in this country. And it's happened kind of decade by decade by decade, to the point where people do get screened out of certain colleges and schools and departments because of their political ideology. And I won't say where, but I've actually watched it happen. I've sat in a faculty meeting once before where a decision was made that we should actually look at where people's political leanings were in their writings or whatever, when making decisions about hiring them or admitting students in. It's a real thing. And if you come from a perspective of more free market economics and political liberty, which kind of aligns you with the political right, or you've worked for a Republican like I have, you just sense it. Where on university campus, or people just say things to your face, where they just assume they know what you think about issues. You're kind of you're easy to put in a box for them. And so I think it's important to course correct, and I think that's what's been happening, not just here with this effort, but in other places around the country, where it's not about creating something that's partisan, and that's definitely not what we're doing. We don't screen any of our faculty or students based on political views. It's just we're building a kind of educational environment that's probably just attractive to people that probably lean a little bit right in their worldview. Whether they're registered as a Republican or not isn't the best indicator of that. It has to do with how they view the Constitution, how they view the question of political liberty, and especially the questions of human agency. I mean, if you believe that people have a responsibility to build and make the life that they want, and they should live in a society that allows them to do that, and they should be able to exercise their free choices there, you're going to probably be attracted to an effort like what we have. So this is happening here at UT. The University of Florida has the Hamilton Center. The University of North Carolina has just started a new school of civic thought and leadership. Ohio State University has followed suit. This is starting to happen in a number of flagship state universities for very similar reasons, because there's just this growing awareness that we kind of need to recover a classical liberal arts education that helps prepare people for life in the institutions that run our country. So we can criticize those institutions, and that's what universities have become good at doing. We can try to undermine them, we can try to reinvent them or whatever. But the reality is we need people to be working in Congress. We need people in the media. We need people in businesses that have a civic function or have some role to play civically, to actually understand the institutions that they're going to be working in, their history, their origins, why they matter, how they function well and how they don't. And that's what I don't think our universities have been doing the best job of preparing people for. So this is a shot at doing it right.
Yeah, and you guys are attracting a ton of talent in the form of academics and professors who are kind of pissed. They're like, I'm tired of getting told what to think, where to think, how to think. Yeah. The point is to find the truth, not to have groupthink. Yeah. And so I've been really impressed at the roster that's coming over to you guys.
Yeah, it's been great. I mean, there is an awareness of some of these dysfunctions that I've been talking about among a lot of faculty around the country. And what we've learned, I was pretty bullish about this. When I left AEI to come down here, I was really bullish about our prospects to grow, to get good talent, to create something big and great. And to make an institution, at the Civitas Institute, to make it like an AEI or like a Hoover Institution at Stanford, something of that scale and scope. That's our ambition, and I think we're on the way to doing that. And so I was bullish from the start. But even with my bullishness, I've been surprised at how attractive this has been to people. We've had people reaching out to us in an unsolicited way. We've been doing a lot of recruiting. We've also had people just reaching out to us saying, you know what? I'm kind of tired of where I am. I'm tired of the groupthink. I'm tired of looking over my shoulder to see if people are going to try to cancel me or shout me down. I want to be at a place where I can pursue my work out in the open and in the true spirit of free inquiry. And that looks like what you guys are building. So it's almost serving to have like a magnetic effect. And as awful and as horrific as the events of October 7th last year were, what it kind of unleashed on university campuses in the aftermath has also just accelerated that sense of urgency. There are some people I think that were going home and complaining about the campus culture where they worked maybe to their partner or their spouse, where they started saying that stuff out loud too. So I think there's just been something in that environment from last fall going through the spring protests here, where we've had people say, what you're building looks like a true university environment. That's what I thought I was doing when I went to graduate school, and I don't want to be a part of something like that. So the environment has pushed people our way too. And then, if you've been reading these articles about, declining applications to Ivy League schools and people going to the SEC schools or applying there, that's true. I mean, we are seeing that at UT, and someone told me last week that our applications are up 98% year over year at UT. I mean, it's amazing how many people want to come and be a part of what we're doing. And not just to our school, but I mean to the university writ large. And I think I got that number right. But the anecdotes that you see, or the reporting that you might have seen in the New York Times or Wall Street Journal about people who you would think would be applying to the Ivies now applying to SEC, we're definitely seeing that as a true thing.
That's fascinating. 98% increase in applications at University of Texas. And we're seeing the Ivy League, so Harvard and Stanford and some of the historical best places you could go, where every parent wishes their child would go, actually determining that they want to go a different path.
Yeah, I mean,
Has that ever happened before? Would this be the first?
I mean, I'm not aware of a historical precedent quite like this. You know, and the thing is, for those of us who've been in higher ed for a while, you know, a lot of the things that people have gotten frustrated about over the last 5-7 years, critical race theory, seeing society as a set of structural inequalities or imbalances, and all that's kind of around that. I mean, this was not just invented in the last 5 years or so. I mean, when I was a graduate student in the late 1990s, we had critical race theory back then too. We had what we called the political correctness movement, you know. But as a teaching fellow, as a graduate student, I had to go through trainings where we learned what words we couldn't say and all that stuff. I think what's happened is that enterprise, it's gone through several iterations, and this time it's just it's become more pervasive, and it's made its way into corporate HR offices, and it's made its way into K-12 education. It's become much more widespread in places where it hadn't been before, back in the days like when I was in graduate school. So there's just a lot more people aware of its effects, and they see the origins of it in the university world, in the world of higher education. And so they want, you know, now people want to send their kids to places where that's least likely to happen. And I think on large, diverse public university campuses, it's less likely to happen there. And there's more checks and balances in a large public research institution. You are a university. You have trustees appointed by governors. You have state legislatures that provide oversight and funding. You have a student body from all across that state and beyond, and just many more departments. And so the way in which the monoculture sort of might capture an elite private college, or even I think some Ivy League universities very broadly, it's just less likely to happen here because you have these checks and balances. So people are figuring that out, and that's what they want. And just anecdotally, I run into this all the time. I mean, I was talking not long ago with a well-known economist who lives in Washington, D.C., sends her son to one of the elite schools in D.C. I'll leave it nameless, but people who know Washington, D.C. would definitely know it. It's one of those schools where every parent thinks their kids are going to be presidents someday or going to be senators or whatever, and they all go to the Ivies or they go to the elites. And she was telling me about how her son and his 7 friends are all applying to SEC schools, you know, and that she and her husband are freaking out a little bit about it because they're spending all this money in this private prep school to send them to the elites, and now they found that their kids want to go where they can have like a real university experience, and they're pretty confident they'll get pretty good jobs on the back end of it anyway. So something's happening in a pretty big way right now, which is going to force some kind of accountability on, I think, some elite institutions that they haven't really felt the pressure to react to before. But I think it's actually going to change their behavior some.
One of my favorite CEOs used to say to me when I first came to the business that he'd eventually rub the MBA off me. And that always kind of made me chuckle. But now I understand a bit what he's talking about, because I think often, especially in some of these higher level institutions, I went to Georgetown, but you're sort of taught things in a way where you're like, this is the way to do it. This is the proper course to do X and Y and Z, which is hysterical once you're in business. Hearing somebody who's never been in business tell you the correct way to do something is really cute. And so I think I had that characteristic quite a bit. I want to talk a little bit about money and universities today. So student loan debt, all-time highs, almost $2 trillion. Over 100 of our taxpayer-funded in some way or another universities with endowments over $1 billion. Do you think the way we fund universities today is good for societies and kids, or do we need reform on that?
Yeah, we need reform. I mean, anytime you have a kind of a third-party payer system, whether it's in healthcare or education, you get all kinds of distortions, right? And so even the way that we've done student loans over the years has just made it easier for universities to run up the costs. I actually think that one of the really big problems is that growing pie slice. If you look at the university budget as a pie chart, that growing pie slice